There used to be a pond about half a mile away from my old house that I would commonly go fishing in. It was nicknamed Daryl's Pond. I still have no idea who Daryl was or why it was called that, but nobody owned it, so people would once in a blue moon go fishing there as well. It was usually me by myself though. I had dug a pole into the ground where I would tie a noose to and from my small kayak. I'd say it was about 3 in the afternoon when I rowed out to the middle of the pond, the sweet spot for getting a decent catch. There was another person coming out from the trees. I waved at him and gave him a smile. He hopped into a small boat floating by the edge of the pond and began to row over to me. As he got close enough where trying to speak to him wouldn't come off as obnoxious, I gave him a friendly, "Perfect day, isn't it?" "Yes, absolutely," he said. He didn't say anything after that, and I started to feel a bit awkward, as if I were obligated to keep some kind of conversation rolling now. "So, you come out here to throw some lines?" I asked. "No, I don't actually fish." "Oh, well, it's never a bad day to relax on the pond," I said. He continued to row closer to me until his boat collided with mine, creating a big thud. I was genuinely uncomfortable now. I didn't feel threatened, just weirded out. I was only 24 years old. This guy looked like he was late 40s or 50s. There was an awkward silence. I tried to just act like I was focused on trying to make a catch, but by now that wasn't even on my mind. This guy was weird. I didn't know what he wanted, and I was uncomfortable being so close to him. I felt him looking at me, or at least in my direction, as I faced halfway to the opposite direction of him. I took a quick glance to my right. Yeah, he was staring at me. I decided to be ballsy and lock eye contact with him. After about 4 seconds, he looked away. "So, where are you from?" I asked him. "Up there." He pointed behind himself, in the direction of the woodsy hill leading past the dirt road. "Oh, you live by Suffolk?" I asked. No, I'm not," he said. "What made you decide to come out here?" I said. "Why not?" I continued to try and uncomfortably fill the awkward silences that kept coming up. His responses were dry. He didn't contribute anything to what was barely a conversation. He just sat there not doing anything with half a smile on his face, looking either at me or in my general direction throughout. I was creeped out. My heart was racing at this point. I'd go as far as saying that I was nervous for my life. We were surrounded by trees in all directions in the middle of the pond. I started to row a bit closer to land, but in a very low-key kind of way, trying to play it off as me just trying to find a better spot to find some fish. I was horrified when I saw he was following me. "What a great day, huh?" I felt a shake in my voice. I got close enough to the edge of the pond where I finally told the man, "I think I'm gonna call it a day." I turned to see his reaction. He was still staring at me, but his smile was gone now. "I can't let you leave," he said. He lifted his flannel to expose a handgun sticking out of his jeans pocket. As soon as I could process what I was looking at, I dove out of the boat for land, ran the whole half-mile uphill through the woods back to my house, and locked every door and window as soon as I made it home. I pulled down the blinds to the dining room window, leaving it open just a crack for peeking outside undetected. It started to get dark out, and I left every light in the house off, still peeking out to the front yard, making sure I wasn't followed. The time came when I finally decided I wasn't followed. I realize now, like you, that not calling the police immediately was a huge mistake. I kept my bedroom windows open to let the room air out. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, so I wasn't worried about being watched through the window. About half an hour after shutting the light and falling under the covers, I heard the sound of leaves crunching from outside. I sat up to hear it more clearly. It was definitely something walking around out there. Normally I would assume it was a deer or a bear, but after what just happened, I was still in paranoia mode. I sat up as still as a statue, except for my shaking out of fear, waiting as the sounds of the steps stopped. "Hey buddy, you up there?" Are you trying to sleep? Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. I felt like 100 pounds just fell directly onto my chest. It was the same voice. I knew it right away. I didn't make a sound. I crept out of the room quietly downstairs to the kitchen and grabbed the phone, practically crawling on my way out to avoid being seen through the open blinds. I called 911 like I should have earlier in the temporary safety of my bedroom. I made sure to whisper into the phone as I was still hoping that he hadn't yet heard or spotted me. 20 minutes felt like an hour as I sat behind my bed, waiting for the police to arrive in constant fear that I would hear glass breaking from downstairs, or a thud on the back door, or even just a voice again from down below my window outside. The police did a thorough investigation of the property in nearby woods, turning up nothing. They suggested I stay with a friend or a family member for a few days, and so I did. I never heard from or saw the man again, but I still moved a month later. I couldn't deal with the constant fear and paranoia of being watched through my windows. I feel much more comfortable fishing out by the bay now. There was this one time I joined my brother-in-law Jack on a fishing trip with him, a couple of his friends, and my sister. He came from money, so he always had an easy life, and ever since my sister married him, it's been the same for her. I packed everything I would need to spend the night on his boat in a small backpack. I drove out to the wealthier side of town by his house, which was by the bay. He lived right by the water, like it was actually in his backyard. He even had a small pre-built wooden dock leading to his luxurious boat with the name Lexi painted on, which is my sister's name. He was inspired by Forrest Gump to do that. He's living the dream life, that much I'm sure. We set sail early in the morning. He had packed tons of food and snacks, lots of hamburger meat because unsurprisingly, they had installed a barbecue onto the boat. They have always had to have everything that cost money, and it's always been infuriating. To be honest, a few hours into the trip, it wasn't even as fun as I thought it would be. Only one largemouth bass had been caught, and that was of course by Jack. They were all getting really drunk. I tried to persuade my sister to let me drink, but she kept scolding me, saying no, since I was only 17 at the time. She was always a nagging buzzkill, and at that moment, I was questioning why I even agreed to go with them. The only part of the trip I was enjoying was being able to relax and tan on the back deck of his unnecessarily large boat. The sky started to turn a beautiful orange as the sun began to set. Jack put the burgers on the grill, which to me seemed odd. 3 fish had been caught by that time, which would have been a perfect, more appropriate dinner, but I would definitely prefer burgers over fish, so I didn't complain. By the time we were done eating, it was dark out. There was something so calming yet unsettling about being in the middle of the ocean at night. It's almost like being in space. Nothing around you as far as the eye can see, and without your vessel, you'd be as good as dead. They were all insanely drunk and or high by now, blasting music and screaming and laughing. They eventually invited me to play Cards Against Humanity with them inside, so I did. I didn't have anything else to do anyway. There was an extra beer sitting on the counter by the small bar, so I just grabbed it. I was long past the point of caring now, and my sister was not in a state of mind to be nagging me anymore. About 3 beers in, I was finally able to loosen up and enjoy myself with a decent buzz. I had to lower the music a good amount earlier because I couldn't even hear myself talking. Jack and his buddies were completely shit-faced now. My sister was drunker than I'd ever seen her, but she wasn't quite as bad as them. It was fine though, they were all adults trying to have a good time, safe and secluded on a boat in calm waters, far from any land where they could cause anyone any harm. But things took a horribly unexpected turn. Over the now much lower music, me and one of Jack's friends noticed a noise coming from outside. I turned off the music completely. There was the sound of 2 men calling for help from outside. We all rushed outside, or at least I rushed, to the side of the boat. There, over the ledge, was a much smaller boat with 2 Indian men looking up at us. I asked them what the problem was. One of them told us they were out of food and gas and needed help. I looked at everyone else. I didn't feel too good about this situation, but everyone else was not even close to a correct state of mind where they should be making important decisions. I felt like I had the burden of deciding what to do. Jack told them to wait there while he went to get the ladder. He tripped on his way and dropped his bottle of beer. I figured I would hate myself if I chose not to help two stranded seagoers, so I helped Jack in carrying the ladder over to the edge and hooking it to the railing. The two men climbed up on board and thanked all of us. Jack, my sister, and their friends couldn't even speak coherent sentences to the two men, so I had to apologize and told them they had a little too much to drink. The two men didn't even seem to acknowledge my statement. They looked at Jack and asked him if we had any extra food. We led them inside to the kitchen. Jack grabbed the leftover burgers from the counter and they shoveled them down. I didn't feel right about this situation. It made me uncomfortable. Jack clumsily handed them a jerry can full of gasoline, and the two men thanked us before climbing back down the ladder. I felt better now. We all went to sleep after that. Jack and my sister got the bedroom, while me and their two friends had to sleep on the pull-out cot and couches. I was rolling around the rock-hard couch for about an hour trying to get some sleep. I eventually had to get up to get a drink and use the bathroom. Jack told us to pee into the ocean to conserve the water on the boat. I opened the door expecting nothing but the sound of the calm water splashing, but instead, I heard the faint sound of a boat motor, along with the splashing of water that would come with a sailing boat. The pitch blackness surrounding the boat prohibited me from finding the source of the sound. I hopped up top by the controls and flipped on the switch for the searchlight. The beam of light provided the perfect amount to search the surrounding waters. Nothing so far. I turned it 90 degrees. Nothing. 180 degrees. Nothing. Then I reached about 3/4 of a whole spin around, and there was the boat from before. It was coming closer. And at that exact moment, I heard the gut-wrenching, blood-curdling scream of one of the guys from below. I jumped all the way back down to deck level and ran back inside. One of Jack's friends was standing in the corner of the room, while the other was sitting up in reaction to the scream. That was followed by Jack and my sister bursting out of the bedroom to see what was going on. He formed a barely audible sentence, saying he saw two figures standing over him. They apparently ran out the front door to the deck. We all ran to see if they were still there, but they were nowhere in sight. I pointed them in the direction of where I saw the boat. The searchlight was still aimed in that exact position, but by then the boat was already gone. We never managed to find them after that. We searched high and low for what they could have stolen. All that we found was missing were a couple of cans of gasoline and Jack's wallet and keys, which he had left on the kitchen table. We had to speed all the way back to Jack's house that night. It took 4 hours to make it back, but nobody had broken in. He used the spare key hidden in the backyard to get inside. Jack and my sister had the lock changed the next day. The scary part, a few weeks ago, their camera systems caught two suspicious men wearing hoods walk up to their front door and seemingly attempt to unlock it, but failing, then quickly running off. We're 99% sure it was them. I was 21 years old and I was fishing with my 84-year-old grandfather for the first time. We took an hour-long drive from our suburban home to a more desolate part of the state. He always went fishing in this one particular lake that no one knew about, where he always managed to leave with coolers full of fish. My grandpa was a hardcore fisher, I'll say that right now. I never even knew there were different terms for the steps of fishing. He was throwing terms at me that I didn't understand left and right, even during the car ride there, which finally ended when we veered off the main quiet road and down about 2 miles of dirt trails. He parked his Jeep at the side of the trail, and from there we lugged the small boat through some dense forest. At 84 years old, my grandpa was no weakling. In fact, I was becoming exhausted from carrying the boat, but I didn't want to show him that by asking to stop for a break, because that would just be humiliating if he could lift it longer than I could. I'll skip ahead to when we were actually sitting in the boat fishing. So he just got done showing me how to actually get the line and the hook in the water. After that, he didn't say a thing. He seemed to be concentrating really hard on what he was doing. I turned around to ask him a question. He seemed to be leaning in, focusing on something in the water. He didn't respond to my question, so I just resumed concentration on the water. I turned around like 20 seconds later out of curiosity, and he was leaning even closer now. I thought something was wrong with him. I put my hand on his shoulder, and that's when I heard splashing sounds. My grandpa seemed to push something back into the water, and then yelled at the top of his lungs for me to paddle as fast as I could back in the direction we came. My heart was racing. I didn't know what happened, but I knew it was something bad. As soon as the boat hit the dirt, my grandpa was moving as fast as he could off the boat and back to the car. We left the boat and equipment behind. When we got to the car, he stepped on it down the trails. All the while I was screaming at him to answer me, to tell me what happened. He seemed to have to gather his thoughts before finally, 10 minutes into the drive, saying, "I was looking down into the water. I knew I saw something. It kept getting closer to the surface. It became clearer as it got closer, and I could swear I saw what looked like a face. And then it got even closer, and as I was leaning in to get a better look, something reached out and grabbed a hold of me." That was the most I could get out of him until a few weeks later when he tried his best to describe what he saw, and from the description he gave, I remember it sounding almost like he was describing a human face. Almost. Perhaps I remember best his single sentence. All I know is, it wasn't no fish.
In November of 2021, I was traveling from Philly to Las Vegas to compete in a jiu-jitsu tournament. I traveled the country a fair amount, and I would normally stay with whichever teams were also competing as a way to save money. This time though, for various reasons, I had to stay alone. I booked an Airbnb not far from the Vegas Strip. I did so kind of hastily, and didn't realize that the neighborhood wasn't the greatest. I thought of canceling and booking something else, but went against my instincts and rationalized that it was close to everything I needed, and I wouldn't be spending much time there anyway. I got to the location and didn't see the host. I wouldn't know who to look for anyway, since the Airbnb profile picture was of a flower. The host gave me the key code to the room I was staying in, a small studio apartment that shared a wall with the host's house. There was only one door in and out of the studio. The first red flag was that the key code for the lock on the door was 1234567. I thought that was weird, but the password for the Wi-Fi was password, so I figured that the host was just an older person who wasn't tech savvy, and the reviews for the room were pretty good. Around 9:30 p.m. is when things got creepy. I was close to falling asleep when I heard a tapping on the window in front of my bed where I was laying down. There were drapes covering the window, so I couldn't see who was making the noise. I responded by saying, "Huh?" loud enough for whoever it was to hear me. A minute or two went by in silence before I heard the tapping on the window once again. I said, "Hello?" pretty loud, and it went away. I was pretty on edge at this point, and immediately wrote a message to the host asking if it was them tapping on the window. About an hour went by before they finally responded saying, "I was going to bring you some water, but it seems like you were asleep, so I left." I was still very much on edge, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to sleep. I contemplated going for a walk to the store or taking a shower just to clear my mind, but something told me to just sit tight and wait to see what happens. About 45 minutes went by. It's about midnight at this point, and I heard some noise outside. I then heard the distinct sound of someone trying the key code on my door. The attempt failed, but I could hear them trying again. This time I heard the sound of the lock disengaging. The door was unlocked. I threw the blankets off of me and ran to the door as it was opening up towards me, and slammed it shut in this person's face. I was yelling, "This is my room, get out of here, leave." They responded in a deep voice from the other side of the door, "Madel said this is my room." Madel was the name of the host. I kept responding with what I said before and called the cops. I spoke loud enough so they knew I was on the phone with the police. Police eventually came and were not surprised at all by the story I told them. They said they would hang around until I called an Uber to leave. The host was very combative and unapologetic. Their alibi for who that person was changed multiple times. When the Uber arrived, I jumped in and felt relieved to be getting out of there. It still creeps me out that I never saw the person who was opening my door. I have a feeling that it was some kind of setup. If the host knew I was flying in from the East Coast, the 9:30 p.m. tapping on the window would have been equivalent to my 12:30 a.m., and the invasion would be about 3 a.m. Maybe it would have just been a robbery, but it could have been much worse. My boyfriend Sean and I went on a trip to Vermont in the summer of 2016. I booked us a stay in an Airbnb that was listed as off-grid cabin. It had a few hundred reviews with a 5-star rating, so I didn't think it looked sketchy. The cabin was an old, one-room cabin with a potbelly stove and a loft area. There was no electricity, and it was in a remote part of Vermont down an old dirt road. There was one house about half a mile away that was owned by the host, and she was away, so we were alone. We got there around 4 p.m. and had a really nice evening cooking dinner and playing board games by candlelight. We had hiked all day and were exhausted by 10, so I went up to the loft to sleep while my boyfriend decided to sit outside and smoke. About 20 minutes later, while I was in that space between deep sleep and consciousness, I was jolted awake by a large banging sound on the side of the cabin. Before I could yell down, Sean yelled up to me asking if that was me. Confused and feeling like I must be dreaming, I groggily yelled, "No, was that you?" He said no, but didn't seem too worried since he was sitting outside and didn't see anyone. We go camping frequently, so it takes a lot for us to get freaked out by random noises in the night. We figured it was probably a tree branch that broke off and fell against the cabin. I started to fall asleep again when there was another loud bang, like a thwacking sound from another part of the cabin. At this, I jumped out of bed and climbed down from the loft. I met Sean as he was coming through the door. He told me to grab all the sharp things that I could find and go back into the loft. He was putting on a calm demeanor, but I could tell he was a little freaked out. I asked him what he thought it was, and he cautiously said that he didn't know. He said he didn't see anything when he was outside, but he thought he might have heard footsteps. As we were whispering, we heard a small, slow scraping noise that trailed for about 3 feet against the wall of the cabin, then silence again. I was pretty scared at this point and didn't know what to do. Our car was parked about 100 feet away from the cabin, so we would have to face whatever was out there in the dark in order to get to it, which is probably what they wanted. I was also afraid that if this was a human, that they might have done something like slash the tires or block our ability to get back down the driveway. Sean told me to stay very quiet and go back up to the loft while he sat downstairs and waited. He had a hunting knife and a large stick, and I had a few steak knives, but otherwise we were sitting ducks. The downstairs of the cabin had huge windows on 3 walls, half of which were just screens, so if someone was outside, they could easily be watching us, or could slash through the screen to get inside. I wanted to stay downstairs, but Sean ordered me to go upstairs, saying that it would be easier to fight this guy without me there if it came to that. I went up and sat in the middle of the bed, clutching an array of knives in my fists. I don't think I ever listened so intently before. Sean yelled out hello to see if he could get any response, or perhaps scare it away if it was an animal. We heard nothing for what felt like 20 minutes. Then the scraping sound came back, much louder, like someone was dragging a rake or a hoe across the side of the cabin. I heard clear, methodical footsteps trailing off around the side of the cabin. Sean then came up to the loft and pulled the ladder up. He said he didn't like how they could see him, but he couldn't see them, and if they came in the cabin, he could at least get the jump on them from up here. We sat on the bed in silence. I was looking at him in terror. It was probably around midnight at this point, and I realized that we were going to be stuck in that cabin until morning. The noises continued and intensified. There was more banging that seemed to be coming from all different sides of the cabin. Intermittently, the scraping returned. This could not have been an animal. The sounds were too methodical, and we didn't hear any grunting like there was a bear or bobcat, and there were constant footsteps, pacing footsteps. There was a clear crunch of one foot going in front of the other all around the sides of the cabin. There would be pauses of 10 to 20 minute intervals. Then it would all start up again. At one point there was a strange rattling sound on the outside, like someone was trying to shake or climb the pipe on the outside of the cabin that fed into the potbelly stove. This carried on for hours. Sean and I just laid in that bed, paralyzed in silent fear, staring into each other's terrified faces. I kept waiting to hear the front door burst open or the screen window rip. I was convinced that we were both about to be murdered, and every gruesome possibility kept playing in my head. I have never been that terrified, but no one ever came into the cabin. We never heard any voices, whispers, deranged giggling, or anything. Just the loud scraping, banging, rattling, and footsteps. Finally, around 5 in the morning, we started to hear roosters in the distance, and the loft was slowly lit by early dawn light. The sounds finally stopped. I got about 2 hours of sleep, because we had to drive into Pennsylvania later that day. My car was thankfully fine, and we packed everything up as quickly as possible to get the heck out of there. Sean looked around the cabin, trying to find scraping marks or clear footprints, but there was nothing. I messaged the Airbnb host to tell her about our experience, and she said it must have been a porcupine. If you could find a porcupine that makes loud banging noises and can walk like a human, let me know. To this day, we debate about what it could have been. Sean thinks it was a crazy local trying to scare us away. Either way, I'm really glad I was not murdered that night. I once booked an Airbnb by myself in an area in Arizona that I had a job interview. Since it was so far from home, I made a short trip out of it. I went with this one specific Airbnb because it was much cheaper than any hotels I could find. It was about half an hour away from where I'd be interviewing for, which was fine with me. It was off some dead-end, secluded road, and it had a nice view of the desert in the backyard. I brought my laptop with me to get work done at my at-the-time current job during the day, so that kept me busy most of the days I was there. I stayed for 3 days. My interview was on the second day that I was there, which was a Tuesday. I would be leaving Friday, so on Monday, the night before my interview, I was practicing interview questions for this specific company, and just generally getting some last-minute knowledge on their firm. I was doing this on my laptop in the living room of the little house, probably around 9 p.m., when there was a tap at the window. I say tap because it wasn't exactly a knock. It sounded more like it could have been someone's finger. My head, of course, swung to the left to look at the window in reaction. I didn't see anyone, but it was also pitch black outside. I was kind of scared to look out the window, but I had to be man and just do it. And there was no one as far as the eye could see. Just darkness. Of course, maybe it could have been a bug hitting the window. We've got some pretty nasty bugs here after all. The next day, I got through my interview and thought I did pretty well. So for the rest of my little trip there, I explored different parts of the town in my car, ate at different restaurants, and sat in the backyard and relaxed in the sun. Little did I know, I was likely being watched while I was in the backyard. That night, I was inside watching Breaking Bad on Netflix when it happened again. A single tap at the window. Now it was obvious it wasn't a bug. I was even more disturbed now, but once again rushed to the window. Even though I saw no one, that didn't mean someone wasn't out there. I checked the windows by the front door, then opened the door and looked outside for a second. Since there was no one there, I went back inside and then went to the back door. I stepped outside onto the back porch and looked out to the desert behind the house. Silence and darkness. And then I heard a click. A sound someone made, like clicking their tongue at the roof of their mouth. It was off in the distance, beyond the light from the house. It was out somewhere in that cold desert. I felt as though someone could be hiding behind any number of those bushes, watching me and toying with me. I yelled out, and almost as if they did it in response, there was another click. I pinpointed the direction it came from and looked that way. I could see someone now, standing not too far away, dressed in dark clothes, blending into the darkness of the desert. I started walking a little closer, then stopped, realizing I didn't want to get any closer to that person. I called out, "You're on private property. I'm gonna call the cops if you don't leave." And I saw the person eerily quickly walk away. I theorized it was the Airbnb owner, but obviously that was a stretch and I didn't really know what to actually think. The night following, I was in my bed on my laptop watching Breaking Bad again before going to bed. I think I watched 2 episodes, so I was doing this for about an hour and a half. I didn't hear any noises in the house, though I was definitely giving thought to that encounter from earlier while watching the show. When I finally turned off the light in the room and tried to fall asleep, within 10 seconds, there was a click sound again, muffled from the inside of the closet. I looked at the closet door, which was open just a crack. Then, a pretty natural response, I sprang off the bed, still in my PJs, and ran to the car. I sat in the driveway with the car running, and I called 911. I stared at the house as I spoke to the dispatcher, waiting to see if someone would come out, because all of my stuff was still in there. A police car arrived, and upon entering the house, we did a quick investigation of the house together. It was very small with not many places to hide. Conclusively, I still packed my stuff and left that place that night for a nearby hotel. I contacted both Airbnb and the host, and I was only able to get a partial refund for my stay. I still think it may have been the host of the Airbnb. I mean, who else would have access to the house? There were no signs of forced entry, which leads me to believe whoever it was may have had a key. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was a stranger who snuck in at an opportune time. When I moved out of my parents' house and into my own apartment, I had a lot of junk and stuff that I needed to get rid of. I never liked Craigslist because I always found it sketchy, especially after hearing so many stories about it. So I listed a lot of my things on Facebook Marketplace. Things that wouldn't fit in my apartment and that my dad wanted out of the house. My weight set, some old childhood toys, book sets, and a whole bunch of other things. The weight set was what I listed for the most money. It had a barbell, a plate tree stand, and a bunch of plates. I was selling it for $340, which I thought wasn't a bad deal. Surprisingly, I wasn't getting many bites. I'd have some people here and there message asking if it's still available, and then never message me again about it. Until a few days after posting it, a guy named Joe messaged me showing interest. His profile picture was pretty grainy, but it was a guy with a fishing hat on holding up a fish. His account info was private. I couldn't see how many friends he had or anything, only that we had 3 mutuals. All 3 of them were girls from my town. The guy's last name was also the last name of a Joe I knew from my town who used to date a girl I was somewhat friendly with, so I right away assumed it was him, especially since I knew that guy liked to fish. After telling him it's still available, he said, "Great, when can I pick it up?" I was pleasantly surprised he didn't try to haggle the price down at all. I said I'm available any night after 7. He said he could come by tonight around 11 p.m. after work. I said that's fine. A little late in my opinion, but if that's what worked for his schedule, it worked for me. I then decided to just be a little friendly and say, "Hey, you used to date Gina, right?" I saw the typing indicator in the chat for a second, but then it went away and he didn't reply. Not for a couple minutes. Then he said yes. I thought it was a little strange, the random pause, but it could have been anything. Maybe he thought it was weird I brought it up, so I just said, "I knew I recognized your name, lol." He read the message but didn't respond for half an hour. Then I got a message back from him saying, "Yeah, lol. Can you send me your address and I'll let you know when I'm coming?" So I sent him my address. He read it and didn't respond for many hours. By the time I got home from work, it was around 6. I went to the gym and got back around 7:30, the whole time waiting for some kind of acknowledgement from Joe. And then he finally messaged back asking for my number. I gave it to him, and seconds later, I got a text from a number with our area code. I have an iPhone, and when I texted him back, it was green. I sometimes will find that to be a red flag and possibly scams, because most people I know have iPhones. But I wasn't thinking that way with this, because I knew this guy already. He said he'd be over in a few hours, and so I continued about my business. It was now around 11 o'clock, and I was waiting patiently for his text or call. I sent a follow-up saying, "Let me know when you're coming." It was around 11:30 that he texted me, "I'm here, come out." I looked out the front window of my apartment, and I saw a dark-colored car out front in the street. I tried calling him so I could tell him that I need help bringing the weights outside. He rejected my call, and then he texted again, "Yo, come out." I texted back, "I see you. You can come in. I just need help with the weights. There's a lot of them." He texted back, "Nah, gotta see if you're straight first." I had to process what the hell that even meant for a second. All I knew was this did not seem like the way this white-as-hell fishing dude would be texting. I tried calling one more time, and he denied the call again. Now I was suspicious. I decided to text that girl Gina, along with the mutual friends I had with Joe on Facebook. The first one to text back was this girl Angela, who said, "OMG, that's a catfish, someone's pretending to be him." When I asked why she added it, she said it must have been a different name when it added her. I looked out the window again, and the car was still there. Someone was about to do something bad to me. I wasn't sure what, or who, or why. I had no way to contact the real Joe because he didn't seem to have any actual social media profiles. Not public, at least. I kept the door shut and locked and didn't respond any further. I turned off the light in the living room and kinked the blind just a bit, and I swear on my life, there was a guy hiding behind one of the bushes in front of the house. I watched until the car outside honked its horn, and then I saw the guy in the bushes run to the car, and then the car sped off. Witnessing that, I didn't feel relief. I felt gut-wrenching fear, not only of what I just narrowly avoided, but the fact that those people now had my address. The Facebook profile was deleted the next day, after a bunch of people reported it, though I think the people who made the account deleted it or deactivated it themselves. Joe himself confirmed he had nothing to do with any of that, and that someone must have been using his pictures and name to try and scam people in the area, though I'm not so sure it was someone trying to scam random people, because days later I got this threatening text. "Hey yo bitch, watch your back, we know where you live. Keep trying to talk to my girl, see what happens man, we'll fuck you up right outside your crib. Sleep with one eye open pussy, we watching." I brought this to the police, but it was such a low priority report to them that I doubt they ever even looked into it. I have no reason to lie when I say I haven't tried talking to anyone's girl in the slightest. At the time of this incident, I had been seeing a girl pretty much exclusively. I think it's connected. I don't know who it is, I don't know what they were going to do to me if I opened the door, but unfortunately I've had to live in slight fear in my new apartment ever since moving here. Fortunately, I haven't gotten any more threatening or random texts, but I still pretty much always check outside my windows first before leaving the apartment at night. It had to be 2018. I was selling this old pinball machine that we had from our childhood. It wasn't some crazy arcade level pinball machine that would cost thousands of dollars, but it was definitely worth a few $100. It had been sitting in my parents' attic for the longest time, so I wanted to sell it before one of my sisters had the same idea. I didn't really want anyone to know about this because then I'd have to split the money, so I chose to list it when my family was away on a trip that I couldn't go on due to work. I'm a bit of a sneak, I know, but you gotta do what you gotta do. My parents' house is on the really nice side of town, but not in a gated community. I put the pinball machine up on Facebook Marketplace for $200. The next day, I got a message from some account with no profile picture with the name Jasmine, expressing interest in the pinball machine. They offered $175. I agreed to that number. We set up a time for when she would come, but when that time came, she never showed up. She messaged me saying, "I'll be there soon, I'll be there soon." It was getting late now and I had work the next day. I asked her if she would be here by 11 the latest. She said 11:30. I asked if we could do this tomorrow instead, but she said she's already on her way. So I just stayed up a little later waiting. 11:45 rolls around and she finally tells me that she's here. I went to the front door and saw there was a car out front. What I wasn't expecting was to see all 4 doors of the car opening and 4 people stepping out, 1 girl and 3 guys. I messaged her, "Are you here with people?" At this point, she wasn't answering her messages anymore. I watched as the 4 people approached my door. I kept the storm door locked. These 3 guys looked kind of big, and all 4 of these people looked like trouble. As they got close enough, I said, "Are you Jasmine?" She said through the door, "Yeah." I said, "I can't let all of you guys in my house, my parents are asleep," obviously lying. Jasmine, or so she claimed her name was, tried opening the door yelling, "What are you talking about?" As she saw it was locked, she started knocking on the glass. I decided it was best to shut the front door at this point. I heard their voices yelling outside for a while and the doorbell ringing. I heard one of the guys, or maybe even multiple of them, yelling obscenities and insults at me through the 2 doors, making me only gladder I didn't let them in. These were not the kinds of people I wanted in my parents' house, especially when I'm alone. I realized this whole thing was an awful idea when I heard their voices laughing and yelling on the front stoop for like 10 minutes after I shut the door. I looked out my little brother's bedroom window upstairs, which is directly above the driveway, and I saw one of the guys pissing in the empty driveway. No cars in the driveway was not a good look. The girl yelled something directed at me as they finally started to walk away, but I didn't hear what it was. I just thanked the Lord when they drove away, and I went upstairs to go to sleep. I was having trouble sleeping that night though, thinking of the interaction. So, fully awake, a couple of hours after climbing into bed, I heard a crash from downstairs. It was unmistakably the sound of a window being shattered. I sprang up, but right before sprinting to make sure the bedroom door was locked, I stopped myself and instead quietly got out of bed and tiptoed to the door. I had already locked it. I tiptoed back to my bed and had my phone in hand, ready to call 911. For some stupid reason, I was waiting till I heard any other kind of sounds before dialing, and eventually, I heard the sound I needed to hear. Footsteps rapidly coming upstairs. I dialed 911 as I felt like throwing up. The footsteps outside the room didn't even sound like they were trying to be quiet. I whispered the entire time I was on the line with the dispatcher. Time was moving in reverse. I hid literally under my bed as I listened to people ransacking the house. In reality, they were in and out in less than 5 minutes, way before the police actually showed up. The backyard window was shattered. Things were stolen from just about each room. Ironically, the pinball machine wasn't taken. What happened from there was I got a police report number. I made an appointment to see a couple detectives at the police station and shared with them all the details I had, including the Facebook account of the Jasmine girl. I fabricated the story a bit, saying someone in the house threatened me. My reasoning for this was I felt that this case would actually be taken seriously if I claimed I was threatened. To my surprise, they did take this seriously. The detectives apparently gathered the necessary data of the Facebook account in question to track this Jasmine girl, who lived a few towns over in a less than desirable area. And with a search warrant, they searched her house and found multiple belongings stolen from my parents' house. She ratted out the 3 men who accompanied her, and they were all charged with burglary. I think most of the stuff that was stolen was recovered. I'm sure there were some things that I wasn't aware of that were stolen that were never returned, but to this day it hasn't come up, so it's fine. I think by me claiming I was verbally threatened may have definitely helped make the detectives take this more seriously, but I could be wrong. My family was of course livid at first, but came to be understanding about it in the end. I was searching Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace for a new phone. This was a long time ago, so it had to be like an iPhone 7 or something. Phones still had the home buttons back then. I found this listing for a phone. It was some generic looking post. iPhone whatever for sale, new, around $300. It was a really good deal for the time, that I remember. He told me all the small details I needed to know, that it was factory unlocked, never opened, and stuff like that. He sent me a video of the box too, still sealed. The guy, whose name was Melvin, seemed nice and easy to talk to over text. I got his number and we discussed a pickup point. His location on the Facebook ad was much closer to me, but over text he was telling me he was only there this morning, and now he went about an hour north. I wasn't happy about this, but this was a really good deal and I didn't want to pass it up. I started asking a bunch of friends if they'd want to come on an adventure with me. Really just a way of making the chore of accompanying me for an hour drive seem fun. My friend Martina actually agreed to come with, on the promise that I buy her food for coming. So this Melvin guy sent me the address of a police precinct about an hour away, saying he only does deals in police precinct parking lots to avoid scams. I obviously had no problem with this. In fact, it made me feel a little more confident in this whole thing. I picked up Martina on the way around 8:30 at night, and off we went. She being in the car and having someone to talk to made the trip more fun. It was also a Friday night, so afterwards we could go out and do whatever we wanted. When I got off the highway, we were about 10 minutes away, and we found ourselves in a very secluded, quiet area. It seemed like a lot of different wooded areas. Occasional buildings and houses, and then more woods. We got to the police precinct, and there was no one visibly parked in the parking lot, besides empty police cars, of course. We drove around the whole building a couple times and didn't see this Melvin guy, who said he was in a black Altima. So I decided to call him. He picked up and said he's having issues with his car on the side of the road, and asked if I could come to him. He sent his location and I checked it. He was on the side of some random road with nothing on either side, and by nothing I mean woods. That's the kind of area we were in. He asked me to come help him jump his car. He had jumper cables. I said, yeah, I guess I can do that. I mean, we drove the hour to get there. I didn't want to just drive another hour for nothing. Martina was shaking her head the whole time I was on the phone. The guy said, see you soon, and hung up. Martina then basically screamed, no way, this is sketchy, we're going home. I told her we'll just drive past the location he sent and see what's up. I did agree with her though. This seemed incredibly sketchy. I just was very upset if we drove 2 hours for nothing. We did drive to the location, and when we got to it, we saw the reflection of a car's front lights coming up on the pitch black road we found ourselves on. As we got closer, I slowed down, and it was in fact a black car, but we couldn't see anyone inside or outside of it. Mind you, it was very dark, but I feel like we would have seen someone's head on the inside or something. Martina said to just keep driving, and I said I know. It was about the sketchiest thing I'd ever seen. A pitch black road between two patches of woods, no streetlights, no other cars in sight. A pretty convenient place to break down and have someone who's coming with a wad of cash to buy something from you come and meet. I drove right past it. Immediately, Melvin starts calling me over and over. I ignored every single call. Then he texted me saying, "I saw you just pass me, why didn't you stop? Turn around." Ignored. Martina is a very positive person, so she laughed about this whole situation, and then said, "Okay, you owe me food." So I looked up the nearest diner, and we stopped there for some food. It was a quiet, small diner. We were just about the only people in there, even on a Friday night. The waitress just took our coffee order, when a lone guy with his hood up steps into the diner and sits in one of the bar stools. He was wearing a navy blue, dirty-looking hoodie. He glanced over to Martina and I, then looked straight ahead, talking to the lady working behind the counter, apparently ordering a coffee. The man kept glancing at our table like every minute, so I whispered to Martina, "Don't look now, but that guy at the counter might be the Melvin guy." The waitress came with our coffees. I asked if we were ready to order. I said, "A few minutes, please." When the lady behind the counter handed that man his coffee, he said loud and clear, "Thank you, darling." It was that guy from the phone's voice, Melvin or whatever his real name was. I told Martina that's him. We need to pay the check and leave. I waved the server over and whispered to her if we can just get the check. She asked if something's wrong, and I noticed the guy look over as I said this. I said yes, we just needed some coffee for the road. So she got the check, I paid, we downed our coffees, and left the building. We got in my car, and Martina said, "Oh my god, he's getting up." I looked into the diner and saw that guy leaving towards the door. As quickly as possible, I drove us out of that parking lot and sped down the road. And yes, we noticed a black car in the parking lot that could have been the one that we saw on the side of the road. I was driving too fast for him to have caught up. We got back on the highway and I was flying for a while, until I got a low tire pressure light come on. I knew instantly he slashed my tire. The PSI was going down fast, so to avoid damage, I pulled to the side of the highway and parked it. I went out to confirm that my tire was slashed. I had to replace the tire with the spare, which took about 15 minutes. The whole thing was a disaster, and if you're wondering, yes, I still got Martina dinner that night. Now Martina and I look at it as a crazy story that we can look back on and tell people. It's absolutely horrifying, though, how close we were to walking into a trap. The month of August is full of thunderstorms where I live, which inspired this video topic. Thunderstorms evoke a certain emotion for me, as I used to love watching thunderstorms with my grandfather. Fragrance is something else that's very powerful in evoking emotions and memories. My grandfather had a very distinguishable scent that I still remember to this day. Through Scentbird, I found many fragrances which I use daily, one of which being Kinetic by Toomey, a fragrance that reminds me of my grandfather and evokes positive memories for me, with the scent mixing the aromas of Italian mandarin, sandalwood, and vanilla. Scentbird is a monthly cologne and perfume subscription service that lets you discover over 700 designer fragrances without committing to a giant expensive bottle, which also lets you try a new fragrance every month to switch things up. Another one of my favorites is Cross River Gorilla, which has a scent that mixes the aromas of cardamom, green apple, violet leaf, and smoked leather, rated as a casual scent perfect for the fall season. What I love about Scentbird is the affordability. The vials are cheaper than a lot of the rollerballs or travel sizes at the store. Scentbird carries some of the finest fragrances like Gucci, Prada, and Versace and delivers them right to your door. You get to try the first fragrance from Scentbird for only $8, and your next month will be only $16.95. If you're interested in trying Scentbird, use my code MrNightmare55 or the link below to get 55% off at Scentbird. You'll get the product for half the price at just $8. I was at a ripe young age where being left home alone was exciting. I I was like 13 and my parents had just recently started entrusting me to be home alone overnight. The only condition was I couldn't leave the house or have anyone over, but I was fine with that. Something about being able to blast my music or video games without my dad yelling at me was just exhilarating. To make things even better, it was a rainy night which turned into a thunderstorm. I sat outside under the awning for a while, watching the thunderstorm as I like to do. I've always loved thunderstorms, as they just make staying in so much more cozy. After a while of watching the storm, I moved my Xbox from my room to the downstairs den TV, my dad's huge flat-screen TV with the Bose sound system. The only time I'd get to game on there was when I was home alone, and I loved it. The den was a half flight of stairs down from the living room level, and it was level with the backyard, so the backyard door was in the den. I'm describing the house in past tense because I moved out, but my parents do still live there. So I was playing Black Ops down in the den with the volume blasting. I was playing online multiplayer in a party with my friend Cody. I had some crappy old headset, which the only audio you could hear was other people in the lobby and game talking. For a 13-year-old standards, it was the perfect night. Until something interrupted my peace. The sound of the doorbell. It was past 9 o'clock by then. I told Cody the doorbell rang, and he said I should go check and see who it was. I wondered if maybe it was my parents back home early, but they had the keys, so they wouldn't ring the doorbell. I hid in a spot in the game where I wouldn't get killed. Then I went upstairs to the front door, asking who's there. I didn't realize how much of a mistake that would be. A male's voice on the other side said, "I need to use a phone." I didn't know what to do, so I didn't answer and went back downstairs. But it was too late. The damage was done, and I let whoever was out there know I was home. I told Cody about it, and his reaction was simply, "Yo, what the fuck?" He agreed with me that I shouldn't open the door, but the doorbell rang again. Cody said to ignore it. That was the last time I heard the doorbell, and after a while, I relaxed again, as it seemed whoever was out there had left. I can't explain the roller coaster of emotions I felt that night. One moment I'm on edge, the next I'm relaxed and back into the fantasy world of my game. And then, as I was most at ease, I heard something to my right, and when I looked, I saw the back door closing and some tall man stepping inside. It was not my dad. It was a stranger. I dropped the controller and ran for the office door, and the cord to the headset quickly ripped out of the controller. I made it to the office and slammed the door shut, and I'm by no means exaggerating when I say the second after I locked the door handle aggressively shook as the man on the other side tried opening the door. The office had 2 doors in it, one that led to the den and one that led to the garage. My only chance to escape the house was to go through the garage. But before even moving, I just stood still, waiting for something to happen on the other side of the door. Seconds felt like minutes. The man knocked on the door and said, "Little boy, I just need to use your phone. I was stranded out in the rain." His knocks turned to pounds as his voice got louder and angrier sounding. It gradually turned to yelling and pounding. He yelled, "Open the fucking door, you little shit," as it sounded like he was literally trying to break down the door. I had no choice but to go through the garage. I pressed the button to open the garage door, and it was so loud and slow to open that I prayed the man couldn't hear it. As soon as it was up about halfway, I crawled under and ran through the storm a few doors down to our neighbor Julian's house, who I knew well because I used to play with his dog Copper when I was little. I heard Copper barking as I rang the bell, looking back in my house, hoping not to see someone coming down the block. Julian opened the door, and I ran into his arms, begging him for help, as his wife came out of the kitchen in confusion. When I told them of the break-in, their demeanors instantly changed. Julian got the police on the phone and handled getting them to my parents' house. It was a long, long wait before the police were outside, and Steve and I went out to them. I told them the same thing I told Steve, and after they asked which door was unlocked, I said the garage. A couple of them went through the garage into the house, and after maybe 5 minutes, they came outside with a man in handcuffs. They made sure he didn't see my face. After he was in a police car, they asked me if I knew that man, and I said no, of course I don't know that man. He had been telling the officers that this was his house and that I was his son. I could tell he was drunk or high or just generally crazy based on the things he was yelling and the way he was acting. He was brought to jail, and my parents had to be contacted regarding how they wished to proceed, and they pressed charges. His name was John McCarty. He got charged for, I believe, criminal trespass. It didn't make me feel any safer that that man would one day be out and know where I lived. Thankfully, it was just a random chance encounter. I don't believe he specifically targeted me or our house. So whenever he was released, he didn't come back. I never thought in a million years that anything truly horrific would ever happen to me. I'm an average person with a boring enough life that anything out of the ordinary was really out of the ordinary. This is why I was always okay with watching or listening to those creepypasta and true horror stories on YouTube. I still do watch them often, but after my own experience, these stories scared me in a whole new way. It was late at night, I'd say around 4 a.m., but I don't really know for sure, and everyone else in my house was asleep. My mother and both of my grandparents. For the past 2 months or so, we get at least one major thunderstorm per week, and it just so happened that this one decided to start earlier that night. Now, I always enjoy a good thunderstorm, especially at night when you can go sit by a window and just watch the lightning, but something about the wind of them always creeped me out. Maybe the fact that it could be soft or deafening and switch between the two almost instantly, but for some reason, wind has always given me huge creeps. Now, this night's thunderstorm was one of the worst we'd had in a long time. It sounded like rocks were hitting my window all night, but I was enjoying listening to it while I browsed Reddit, as I do, when all of a sudden, the power went out in the blink of an eye. This was kinda creepy, but I didn't really mind, because I had my data and a decent charge on my phone, so I continued browsing. After a little while, I started to get tired, so I figured it was time to shut my phone off and get some sleep. I placed it on the side table next to me and rolled over to go to sleep. I guess I passed out shortly after because I don't remember anything in between the rain hammering at my window and the eerie silence of a soft wind outside. I assume the rain stopped while I was asleep. I rolled over to get more comfortable because my side was hurting, and then I realized just how parched for water I was. I took a few minutes to try and fall back asleep again, but it didn't happen. My mouth was just too dry. I sat up, grabbed my phone, and turned on the flashlight so I could have a source of light to the kitchen to grab a glass of water and go back to bed. As I opened my bedroom door, I was smacked in the face with a blast of cold air. It was freezing in the living room. I quickly threw on a sweater and continued to the kitchen. As I was nearing it, I could hear the wind becoming louder and the temperature become colder. I reached the kitchen and walked in, grabbed a glass from the cupboard, and started to fill it with water from the tap. I took a quick glance around the kitchen and noticed something weird. The door to the patio was left open. Naturally, I was weirded out by this and a little scared, thinking of how that could happen. I ended up rationalizing to myself that my grandfather must have left it open earlier that night and just forgot about it. I walked over to the sliding door, glanced over my shoulder out of paranoia, and slid it shut and locked it. I fast walked back to my room just in case. I opened my door and closed it behind me, and then laid back down in bed, my glass of water on my side table, and flashlight still in hand. I was able to calm myself down slightly, enough to turn off the flashlight and try to get some shut-eye. Something inside of me wasn't letting me forget the possibility that there might be someone in my house. I got back out of bed again and slid my chair from my desk to my door in an attempt to keep someone out. I then checked the closet again, just in case. I laid back down again and kept my flashlight on as a sort of nightlight this time. Then, the most disturbing thing that's ever happened to me occurred. I felt a slight bump come from under my bed, accompanied by a creak of the bed springs. I then realized I hadn't checked under my bed like an idiot. It felt like I was gonna vomit, and I leaned off the side of my bed and peered underneath. I saw the disturbing sight of an extremely unhealthily skinny woman with bloodshot eyes and yellow teeth staring back at me. She was smiling an ungodly grin that I still can't get out of my head. She stared at me for at least 3 seconds while I was still trying to process what I was seeing, before she, I swear to God, cackled like a fucking witch. At this point, my whole brain was screaming nope, and I leapt out of my bed towards my door, moved the chair as fast as possible, and sprinted down the hall to my grandparents' room. I banged on the door as loud as I could while calling for my grandfather. He was out within seconds and he had a gun in his hand, something he had never even mentioned having in the house. We ran to my room, him in front of my grandmother and I, and we just barely caught a glimpse of a white figure running away from the bedroom window. My grandfather took a shot, presuming as a warning to tell them to never come back. We didn't end up calling the police because we figured they wouldn't be able to do anything since we don't have security cameras or have any idea who she even was. All I can guess was that this woman was dangerously ill and saw my bedroom light on before the power went out. I have no idea what her intentions were or if she even knew what she was doing. We're getting the windows and doors in the house installed with locks sometime the next week just for safety. And all I can say is, even if you live in a safe area or a trusted community, bad things still can and do happen, and you always have to take precautions against such things. It was August. My girl Cass and I went upstate for a little weekend getaway at my family's rustic mobile home. It has running water, electricity, and a toilet, so we call it luxury camping. The home is very small, about 600 square feet. 1 bedroom, 1 pull-out couch in the living room, 1 bathroom, and a very small kitchen. Despite its remote location, there's lots to do, including archery, shooting, dirt biking, and off-roading. We had a whole little itinerary planned for the weekend. Friday, we mostly just unpacked and went out to eat, went grocery shopping, then relaxed. Saturday, we did most of the stuff I just mentioned before, until it started getting really cloudy out, like storm clouds. We also could feel it in the air that a big storm was brewing, so we put all the stuff we took out back into the outbuilding. We put a movie into the DVD player as we cooked dinner. At some point while we were eating, we heard the sudden torrential downpour of rain on the roof of the home. Pretty soon, there were loud, thunderous crashes of lightning almost directly overhead. We both wanted to go sit outside and enjoy it as we ate. We relaxed on the deck outside under the canopy, with an amazing view of the sky. Long bolts of lightning constantly lit up the dark night sky, the thunder booming almost instantly after the lightning strikes. We were right in the heart of the storm. And then, we heard something out in the woods. It was a voice. A loud voice, seemingly calling out something, but it was nowhere near discernible. So the place is really remote, like I said. Hearing any other voices nearby would already set off alarms in normal conditions, but during a storm like this, it was extremely concerning. We had to assume that it was a lost hiker or something. I stepped over to the edge of the deck, getting a little wet as the rain blew in under the edge of the canopy. With the constant crashing of thunder and lightning, there were moments of light in the vicinity that allowed me to see just far enough away to the tree line where the woods began. There was a person out there, clear as day. I told Cass, and she instantly freaked out, thinking I was joking and telling me to stop. I considered calling out, asking if they needed help, but decided against it on the grounds that I was kind of scared. This weekend was my idea though, and I did kind of drag Cass up here. I didn't want to ruin the experience freaking her out. I went back to her and said I think it's a hiker. She asked if we should offer some help, and I said not unless they come knocking on the door. I told her we should go inside, and I nudged her in. I went back over to the edge of the deck just out of curiosity. I got even wetter as I looked around, until I spotted something. It looked like a person again, much closer to the deck, like a lot closer, only about 20 feet away now. I continued to look, until a quick flash of lightning briefly exposed a man standing there, confirming my suspicion. He was wearing bright colors and almost looked white. He was just standing still. That was the scariest part. He wasn't even approaching the deck or anything. I went inside and quickly locked the door. Cassidy saw the worry in my face. I felt my heart racing and I almost felt nauseous. I'm sure I almost stuttered as I said, "I don't know who that is." And then I saw the worry in Cass's eyes worsen. I did my best to keep her calm, telling her to expect someone knocking on the door asking for help. I said they probably just need shelter from the storm. I tell you, it was the longest 5 minutes ever, just sitting and listening to the pouring rain and lightning outside, before we felt and heard the footsteps outside on the deck, even over the sound of the storm. The home doesn't have a doorbell, so we expected a knock on the door, but instead, there was this weird shuffling sound on the other side of the lone wooden door. It sounded like attempts at opening it. It was at this point that the worry I had been feeling had peaked. I think I felt an adrenaline rush at this point. Cass was already in the bedroom hiding at this point, and she was quietly calling for me to come. The noises at the door stopped, but there was never a single knock. I went to the bedroom and told Cass to just remain quiet. I'll be back in the room in a second. I wanted to look out the window. I went back to the living room and turned off the lamp. I took a second to just breathe before yanking the curtain open. I looked out the window and I saw the white figure of the man running away from the window and quickly disappearing. I didn't know what was going on. I hoped that they ran away for good. To be safe, I went to the kitchen window and looked out. This one didn't have a curtain or blinds. I realized about halfway to the window that there was a face on the other side. I could see it even through the blur created by the rain on the window. I yelled at the top of my lungs, "Yo, go away," trying to sound scary. They didn't move. Now when I say this, I know it sounds incredibly cliche, but we don't have Wi-Fi in the home and the cell reception is very on and off. During a storm like this, there was no reception at all for either of us. There was my dad's rifle under the bed in the bedroom though. I left the kitchen and hurried to the bedroom where Cass was sitting in the bed biting her nails on edge. I grabbed the rifle under the bed from its case since we hadn't yet taken it out. There was a magazine already loaded with rounds thankfully, so I popped the mag in the rifle. Doing this in front of Cass obviously meant I was no longer sugarcoating what was going on, but it didn't matter because there was suddenly a bang at the bedroom window. Something was either thrown or someone straight up banged their hand on it. And then a second later, there was a bang from another window out in the living room or kitchen. It was more than one person. This had gone far enough at this point. I told Cassidy to wait in the bedroom. I went to the front door and positioned myself to be ready to potentially fire at anyone on the other side of the door should they rush me. I quietly unlocked the door, and when I was close enough to mentally ready, I yanked the door open and drew my rifle up, pointing at the door. No one was there, and so I hurried outside with adrenaline controlling my actions and spun around quickly to ensure no one was on the deck. Then I went to the stairway and looked down, and there was that guy in bright-colored clothes standing where he was before outside the window, apparently trying to look scary. He looked up at me. He already knew I was outside, but I doubt he knew I had a gun. I shot the rifle into the air, and I heard the guy yell in a deep voice, "Oh shit," as he ran away into the darkness. I heard at least two fading yelling voices likely communicating to each other, and then it was just the sound of the storm again. I don't know how many people were out there. At least two, maybe even three. It could have been teenagers playing some fucked up prank, or it could have been some really messed up people trying to scare us and break in. I don't play around like that though. If anyone came up that deck while I was outside, I would have shot them dead. They were not there seeking help, and that is a 100% certainty. The next day was Sunday, and so we packed up and left. There were no signs of anything having been done to my car or the home or anything from the night before. I made sure to lock everything up and take anything of particular value home this time. Out of all the years of my family owning the place, that was the only encounter like this any of us had ever had. It really put a bad taste in my mouth about the place and being in an isolated place. I've been up there a few times since with my family, but I would never ever go alone.
As you're about to hear in the following stories, mental health is not something to be taken lightly, and it's important to stay on top of your mental health. You grow up imagining your life will look a certain way at a certain age, but things don't always work out the way you pictured. Maybe you don't end up in the job you thought you would. Maybe you're feeling stuck, or like everyone else is moving forward while you're just standing still. It can be hard to talk about that, even harder to ask for help. Maybe therapy always feels like something other people did. But then I learned that it's not about having something wrong with you. It's about understanding yourself and finding a healthier way to move forward. That's where today's sponsor, BetterHelp, comes in. BetterHelp matches you with a licensed therapist after a short questionnaire, often in just a couple of days. And if it's not the right fit, you can switch therapists anytime at no extra cost. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.3 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. Go to betterhelp.com/Mr. Nightmare to get 10% off your first month. The link is also in the description.
So a little backstory. I dated this girl when I was in my senior year of high school. I'm 20 now, so it was a couple of years ago, but still pretty fresh in my mind. For privacy's sake, I won't use her real name, so I'll refer to her as Grace. Grace and I met through our job, which I now know is never ideal. Before we started dating, though, there were red flags that I simply shouldn't have ignored. For instance, she would come to our place of work for hours just to watch me work, and I would catch her staring at me every once in a while. Besides that, a few months into our relationship, things started getting pretty toxic. I would constantly feel suffocated. I had no time for my hobbies, friends, or even myself. She was the type of girl to ask where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing 24/7. If I didn't answer a phone call, it would end up being 25 missed calls and a ton of text messages that would ultimately turn into a fight, even if I was just using the bathroom. It got to the point where I couldn't play games with my friends without it causing a fight, so eventually we broke up, but not without her doing everything in her power to convince me to come back. She would wait outside my place of work for me to get off, and when I would walk outside, she would follow me to my car, block me from getting in, and try to reason with me. I got sick of it. One night she came and wanted to talk, so I decided to talk with her, not really knowing what else to do. Grace was also trying to sue me for something extremely petty that I'd rather not get into, and would use this as a scare tactic to make me talk to her. So anyway, I sat down in her car. She was saying the same old stuff I'd heard hundreds of times. I told her I was done talking, but at that time, her dad called her. She used this as a threat and told me, if you don't sit here and talk to me, I'll have him sue you now. And to that, I said, fuck this, and attempted to get out of her car. The door was locked though, so as I was unlocking it, she grabbed hold of my arm and dug her nails into my skin. I looked at her and was genuinely shocked because she'd only been verbally abusive before, never physical. I had also never seen that look on her face. It was pure malice, and I won't lie, I was pretty unnerved. I myself am a pretty tall guy, and she was very small, so I knew I could overpower her if I had to. I swung her door open and tried to step away, but she was holding me extremely tight. I told her to let me go, but she wouldn't budge. I kept pulling on my arm, trying to get away, but she would not move an inch. At this point, my skin was starting to peel, so I made a judgment call and pulled her toward me onto the passenger seat, which gave me enough time to get away and into my car. I drove home faster than I ever have, and I really wish I could say it ended there, but of course it doesn't. Unfortunately for me, Grace and I are practically neighbors, and she lives a couple blocks away. That night, while I was playing video games, I heard a car outside, but I kinda chalked it up to my game as I remember playing GTA 5 that night. I had also smoked a bit of weed, so I figured that would have made the car noises louder. A little bit of time passed, and as I was playing, I heard a tap on my window. I thought I was being paranoid, as weed can tend to make me a little on edge sometimes, especially after what had happened. But that thought quickly faded after I heard another tap and a female voice saying my name. I knew it was Grace, and I started to panic. My window doesn't have the best blinds, so I knew she could see me. I didn't want to open my window because at this point, I knew she could be potentially dangerous. I pretended not to hear her, hoping that she would go away. But of course, she didn't, because after a minute or two, she started banging on my window. Her tone changed from soft and apologetic to more aggressive and angry. I couldn't make out much of what she was saying, but it was something along the lines of, "You can't do this to me, you're an asshole," that sort of deal. I had to do something. I didn't want to waste the cops' time, but now looking back at it, I absolutely should have called them. I made the stupid decision to open my door and ask what she wanted. I asked why she was here and why she couldn't just leave me alone. Her tone changed once again to soft-spoken, and she was asking for her sweater back. I yelled at her and told her she can't just be at my window at 2 in the morning asking for a sweater, and then I said if she didn't leave my property, I'd be calling the cops. At this point, she blew up screaming at me while starting to sob uncontrollably. For a moment, I actually felt bad, but then my heart dropped as I saw something that still sends shivers down my spine to this day. She wasn't alone. To the left of her was a thick tree in our front yard, and peeking out from it was a hooded figure. She saw me move to focus to the tree, and she knew I saw them. She reached for my arm and grabbed me, and as she did this, I saw the person run out from behind the tree, but I couldn't make out any facial features. It didn't matter, because they were sprinting toward my window. In that moment, my fight or flight kicked in, and I slammed my window shut on Greg's arm. She screamed out in pain and pulled it back. I slammed it shut and locked it just before the other person reached my window. My heart was racing, and it felt like I couldn't breathe. I showed them my phone dialing 911, and at that, they hurried back to her car, started it, and drove away. I was in total shock, not even comprehending what had just happened. They sent an officer to my house. He took down my story and told me they'd call if anything came of it. Of course, there wasn't much they could do, as there was no evidence anything happened, like most 911 calls. As far as I know, she never had any legal action taken against her. As for what they wanted with me, she's also gotten people jumped and robbed before, so I wouldn't doubt they wanted to do that or possibly worse. I'm just extremely lucky that the person hiding behind the tree decided to peek out. My name is Amy, and I haven't really slept much since last Tuesday. Not because I can't, but because I don't feel safe closing my eyes anymore. That's what happens, I guess, when someone you thought you knew turns out to be capable of something you only expect from horror movies. I broke up with my boyfriend Tommy 3 weeks ago. It wasn't dramatic, at least not at first. We'd been dating for just under a year. In the beginning, he was sweet. He was overly attentive and always texting and calling like any partner wants. At first, it felt like real love, the kind you think you're lucky to have. But over time, it turned possessive. He'd get upset if I took too long to reply. He'd ask weird questions like who I'd smiled at that day or if I had seen any guys looking at me. Sometimes he'd show up at my job unannounced, just standing outside the window like he was checking in. He even showed up to the bars I was at with friends if I was having a girls' night out, and then forced me to come home with him. My friends started to hate him for these exact reasons. He never trusted me, but I didn't end it until he started asking if I'd ever consider putting a tracker on my phone to keep each other safe. Not to start sharing each other's locations, but to literally put a tracker on my phone. That was the last straw for me. I told him it was over, and in response, he cried at first, but then he went silent. I remember hanging up on our last call with this strange tightness in my chest, like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. For a little while, things were quiet. I blocked his number and tried to move on. I started going back to the gym, cooking real meals, just trying to feel normal again. But about a week after the breakup, I started getting strange messages. Not from Tommy, or at least not directly, but from random numbers with no name or context. They were short, usually just a vague single sentence. I didn't reply to any of them. That's a surefire way to get a spam number to know to keep harassing you. I just blocked each number as it came. I did not tell my friends. I told myself it was probably a scam or some spam bot because I've always gotten spam texts. But then, things moved beyond just random texts. One night, I was in bed and had to get up to pee. I went into the hallway outside my bedroom, and before entering the bathroom, I thought I heard a soft noise come from downstairs in the foyer. I'm not the type to go check on a noise. I get scared in the dark, hence why I always like being in a relationship so I don't have to stay alone all the time. I didn't go down to check it. I convinced myself it was a radiator clicking or something. I've lived in this apartment for almost 2 years, and most of that time was spent living with my ex George and then Tommy the remainder of that time, but hardly ever alone. I know the sounds it makes, and honestly, that sound was not one I'd heard before. So after I went to the bathroom, I went straight back into my room and jumped into bed, thinking the thin sheet of blanket cloth would protect me. Another night, around 2 a.m., I could have sworn I heard a door in my apartment open from outside my room. That was the sound that woke me up, so I wasn't 100% sure of it. It could have been part of my dream, maybe. Still, my heart was racing. I texted my family group chat with my siblings and my parents, just saying, I keep hearing noises every night, I'm getting scared. Of course, they were all asleep though, so I went back to sleep. That weekend, I came home from visiting my sister and immediately felt like something was off. Nothing was missing or broken, but I felt like maybe doors were left open at angles that they weren't left before. It may sound far-fetched, but it's not. I have a habit of leaving doors closed or near closed when I leave my apartment. All the doors were basically fully open in the entire apartment. There was no draft at all. I keep the air conditioning on most of the time. I walked through the apartment slowly, checking each room. My stomach dropped when I saw that the hallway closet was slightly open. Now I knew something was wrong. I always leave that closet door closed. There's no reason to leave it open, and plus, the door tends to swing out if I do leave it open. I stared at it for what felt like a full minute before I approached. When I pulled it fully open, nothing was there. Just coats and shoes, same as usual. That night, I pushed a chair under my bedroom door and slept with a knife under my pillow. I kept the bedside lamp on. I must have dozed off at some point because I woke up to the sound of something moving, just a soft shuffle. I sat up slightly, confused, and then I realized the light was now off and the room was dark. I looked toward the door. I could see it was open, but I had wedged a chair under it. How could it be wide open? At first, I thought maybe I dreamed wedging the chair and leaving on the light, or maybe I'd gotten up in my sleep, but I quickly found out how wrong I was. I saw something at the foot of my bed in the dark. I swear I couldn't tell what it was. It was just some black mass in the dark. But when I finally started realizing that what I was looking at was the top half of someone's head, it was too late, because I felt two hands start caressing my feet, and I completely lost it. I screamed so loud until I had no air left in my lungs, and I instantly recognized Tommy's voice telling me to calm down. But when I kept screaming, he got on top of me and put his hand over my mouth. He told me he wasn't there to hurt me, just to talk. He said he wouldn't let go of my mouth until I agreed to be quiet, so I nodded. The first thing I asked him was how he got into my apartment, and he said he made a copy of my key when we were together just in case there was ever an emergency. He never told me he did this. Straight psychopath behavior. He must have snuck out overnight one night with my keys to do it somewhere. As I sat there listening to him, I debated pulling the knife, but I was too scared to do so. I knew if I did that, I had to actually be ready to use it. He kept saying over and over how he wasn't there to hurt me, just to talk, but it seems like he was simply there to scare me into agreeing to get back with him, and I truly was too scared to say no in fear of what he might do. So I said yes, but I asked him to simply leave for the night because I was shook. I think he was there in my bed for half an hour total before he left, and when he was gone, the first thing I did was call the police and explain the break-in. I said I was scared that he was still on the premises so that the police would actually come. When they did, I made an official police report, which I later used to file a restraining order against Tommy, with enough people backing up my claims, since I couldn't actually prove he broke into my house. A detective later traced the fake numbers back to his cell phone through some fake phone number app, which was also helpful in getting the restraining order. I stayed with my parents until I was able to get a new apartment. My advice to all women out there is the first sign of any sort of mental illness in the man you're with, you should really consider getting away as soon as possible just to be safe. I still have to live with the trauma of waking up to him in my room, and I had to actually consider pulling a knife on him. I dated Marissa for a year and a half. At first, she was one of the most intense people I'd ever met. Not in a bad way. She was passionate, charismatic, and could talk about anything for hours. When she left, it was like she pulled you into her world. The first few months were incredible. She'd surprise me with gifts, leave sticky notes with poems on my mirror, text me goodnight every single night without fail, but that intensity had a darker side. She didn't do calm or wait and see. Everything was either perfect or catastrophic. If I was 5 minutes late responding to a text, she'd send a stream of messages, first worried, then angry, and then apologizing. It got worse slowly, almost invisibly. She once accused me of cheating because I liked an Instagram post from a girl I hadn't spoken to since high school. And when I told her that something she did made me uncomfortable, she would shut down completely. I don't mean just get quiet. I mean she would sit in my apartment for hours staring at the wall, just refusing to leave until I told her everything was fine. The first time she showed up at my office unannounced was 6 months in. She brought coffee and acted like it was cute, like we were some TV couple. I laughed it off, but the second time was because I hadn't answered her call. She stayed parked outside in the lot until I came down. She'd been crying. I told her it wasn't okay, and she just smiled and said, "You'd do the same for me, right?" I didn't have an answer for that. I kept making excuses for her. Trauma, abandonment issues, childhood stuff. I thought if I just proved I wasn't gonna leave, she'd calm down. Instead, the more I gave, the more she needed. Eventually, I reached my limit. I told her it had to end. She didn't yell or cry, she just stared at me in silence for what felt like minutes. Then she nodded and said, "You think it's over for you, but it's not over for me." I remember how cold that made me feel, like it wasn't even a threat, just a fact. I blocked her on everything that same night, and I changed my number. I even asked my building manager if I could get a different unit. For a few weeks, I thought it worked. Then the letters started showing up. The letters had no stamps or return addresses, just my name handwritten on the envelope, usually left between my door and the frame. I held on to some of these notes. The first one was kind of nostalgic. It said, "I miss waking up to you. I still sleep on the side of the bed where you used to lay." The second one got stranger. It said, "You always check the door 3 times before you go to bed. You probably don't even notice it, but I do." The third letter was the one that made me pack a suitcase. It said, "You wore your blue hoodie Monday, the one with the hole in the sleeve. You should sew that up before it gets worse." That was the same hoodie I wore when I went to pick up groceries that day at a store across town in the pouring rain. I hadn't seen anyone, not a single person I recognized, but she had seen me. I knew then that moving across the city wouldn't be enough. I found a job in Denver, a good one. I didn't tell anyone except my brother and immediate family. I left no forwarding address. I even created a new email for the job, and I didn't link any personal info. I went completely dark. I even got a P.O. box under a false name. I thought that would be enough, and for a while it was. Many months passed, and I slept soundly. I started dating again, nothing serious, just drinks and movies. But I was laughing again. I felt like a person. Then, one Saturday, I opened my P.O. box and found an envelope. Just my name again, no stamp or return address. Inside was a Polaroid. It was of me walking in my apartment building, taken from behind. My earbuds were in, and I had a coffee in one hand. It was cold out. You could see snow on the sidewalk and the mountains in the background. I checked the back, and written in red ink, it said, "Your shoulders slouch when you're tired." I didn't wait. I moved again, faster this time. I paid cash for a rental in a different part of town. Smaller building and fewer tenants. I switched jobs once again and told my boss I had family stuff and had to go fully remote. I got a rescue dog who was big and loud, a big German Shepherd mix to try and keep me sane. I deleted mostly everything online. I had no apps or social media. I went gray for almost a year and heard nothing, no letters or pictures anymore. I let myself believe she was finally gone, until the post-it note. It was stuck to my front door one evening when I got home from walking the dog. It was a yellow note with red ink, and it said, "I don't like the beard." My stomach actually dropped. I'd grown it out maybe 3 months prior. Nobody had seen me with it except the dog and maybe my work webcam, which I kept taped over unless on a call. I shaved it off that night. I told myself it was a coincidence, but the next morning, another note was waiting. Tucked under the windshield wiper of my car, it said, "Better." I contacted the police again and filed a report. They said without threats or property damage, there wasn't anything they could do. I asked if I could file a restraining order, and they said I'd need to prove she'd been near me, which, without seeing her or catching her in the act, was nearly impossible. I changed my habits and started paying attention to every detail, like locking the doors and drawing the blinds. I didn't sleep much. I'd lie in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling and waiting for the floorboards to creak. 2 weeks passed with no incident. I started to wonder if maybe the notes were old. Maybe she'd left them a while ago and I'd only just noticed. But deep down, I didn't even believe that. Then one night, I woke up in the middle of the night with this horrible feeling, like someone had just been watching me, and they only just stepped out of the room. I got up and checked the doors and windows, even under the bed like I was a kid again. Nothing was out of place. But the next morning, taped to the outside of my front door, was a small envelope like someone had taken their time to align it perfectly. Inside was a photo, one I hadn't seen in years. It was Marissa and I in a boardwalk photo booth from back when we were still together. We were smiling and her head was on my shoulder, but her eyes had been stretched out in deep gouges like someone had used a needle or a pin. I moved again, not across town this time, but out of the city completely. I found a small cabin 3 hours into the mountains. It was isolated and surrounded by pine trees with only one road in. I paid in cash and used a fake name on the lease, which was a month-to-month payment system, and I left my old smartphone behind, getting a second phone number in the process. I bought a burner phone for emergencies mainly. I worked remote through a company-issued laptop that only connected through a secure VPN. No one besides my immediate family and my best friend knew where I was. I kept to myself. The only quote-unquote visitor I got was my Uber Eats driver delivering occasional groceries. For a whole month, I barely even went into town, and it all finally worked, until I heard footsteps outside crunching the snow. My dog went ballistic. The next morning, I found the footprints. They were shoe marks, and they went from window to window. There were no notes or anything left anywhere on the house, though. What else was I to assume other than it was her? That she found me again? Even though I still don't know for certain if that was actually her that time, I spent that entire day packing my things and driving back to my hometown. Today, I'm living in a house with 3 roommates who are in the military. If that's not a house that people know not to mess with, I don't know what is. Their pickup trucks, purple heart plates, and giant flags all over the front of the house are absolutely deterrent to Marissa playing whatever psychopathic game she was playing. She's a mentally unstable stalker, it's clear as day, and she's a danger to herself, me, and whoever she gets involved with in the future. I just wish law enforcement was more willing to step in and do something before something really bad happens. In June of 2019, an ad was posted on Craigslist for a room available for rent in a single-family home in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania. The ad wasn't for a whole house rental, rather the man who posted the ad was looking to be roommates with somebody, meaning they would share the living space including the kitchen. This is what the ad said. 35-year-old male here, looking to rent out one of the empty bedrooms in my 4-bedroom, 1-family house. It's just me living here currently, and I'm looking for a roommate. The other 2 bedrooms are currently being used as storage, but depending on how much space you need, I could consider allowing you to use one of the extra spare bedrooms as storage as well. The ad then goes on to list all the features inside the house and included maintenance. It even goes on to note in all capitals that no pets or smokers were allowed, which could lead someone to believe the person behind this listing is a clean, halfway trustworthy person. A few days after this ad was posted, a regular 25-year-old named James came across the listing. Desperate for a place of his own and to move out of his parents' house, and for $900 a month, he thought it could be a good deal depending on the homeowner, of course. James contacted the owner through the number provided on the ad, and they had a 5-minute phone call setting up a time and day for James to view the house. On a Tuesday after work, James stopped by the house, which was exactly how it looked in the ad. The owner was waiting on the front stoop. He introduced himself as Todd. He was at least 40 years old. Todd gave James a walk around the house like you would do if you were viewing any apartment or house for the first time. The house was a modest size, nothing fancy or anything, but pretty clean, and for the price it was spacious enough. James noted that there were no wood floors, it was all carpet, even in the living room and bedrooms. After the showing, Todd discussed with James the ground rules, which mostly were normal, but one that stood out to James was the rule of having a sleep time by 12 during the week. Since James works full-time, he didn't see this as much of an inconvenience, just a rather unusual rule to have in a roommate situation. But he chalked it up to Todd also working a 9 to 5 and not wanting to be woken up by noises late at night. A week later, James moved in, which given that the bedroom was already furnished, it was an easy, quick process. Todd would be in the living room most of the time, watching TV or just reading the paper. He didn't seem to go out much. He would try to talk to James anytime he were in the kitchen making food, which got a little old pretty fast according to James, who says he would often just want to eat in peace but never had that luxury. On one work night, James woke up thirsty, so he went to fill up a cup with water down in the kitchen, when he noticed red stains on the carpet leading to the basement. He quietly opened the basement door and found that the red stains led down the carpeted stairs. but that Todd's voice came from the kitchen, which was lit up by a small nightlight, and Todd was sitting in one of the kitchen chairs. He said in a raspy voice, "Don't go down there right now." Todd said the stains on the carpet were wine stains. James didn't ask questions. He just filled his cup with water and went back upstairs. From this moment onward, James wasn't 100% comfortable in the house, and was now suspicious of his landlord/roommate. One day after work, Todd wasn't home, so James decided to take a look in his bedroom. The door was locked, but was easily unlocked with his fingernail. Inside, James immediately found 2 of his shirts, and strangely his Under Armour water bottle and a basket of clothes. James took his 3 belongings and left the room, then relocked the door with his fingernail. He planned on taking a personal day from work and evacuating the place early the next day without mentioning anything. After all, there was no lease or security deposit, so he could leave pretty easily. He did some packing that night and had a hard time sleeping because his mind was racing. His door creaked open at sometime past midnight. Since he was laying on his back, he simply opened his eyes to see Todd, standing at the doorway, the dim light from the hallway nightlight illuminating his face and body in an unsettling way. Possibly not even aware if James was awake or not, Todd said into the room, "I know you went into my room. I told you my room is off limits. From now on, I also don't want you going in the basement. If this happens again, there's going to be a big problem." He then angrily slammed the door, and James heard him stomping back down the hallway to his bedroom, where he then slammed that door as well. James says that Todd sounded drunk when he was saying this, as he was slurring his words and his voice was raspier than usual. James started packing the rest of his things and left first thing in the morning. He blocked Todd's phone number and temporarily moved back into his parents' house. A couple days later, he received a voicemail from some random number that sounded kind of garbled, but a breathing into the phone could be heard. This was what it sounded like. James says he's confident that the stains in the carpets weren't wine, they looked more like blood stains. Whether this Todd guy was hiding something or not will remain a mystery. This next ad was a lot more sinister and dark on the surface. On March 9th, 2001, in the early days of the internet, there existed a forum called Cannibal Cafe, a defunct forum for people with a cannibalism fetish. This is where Armin Maiwas posted his gruesome barbaric request that looked like this. It was titled "Wanted a Battle Boy. Are you between 18 and 25 years old, normal and healthy? Is it your desire to put an end to your life? But if you want something more sensible, then come to me. I'll slaughter you and use your body in delicious steaks and schnitzel. Interested? Then please apply with indication of age, height, and weight, and preferably with a photo." It was signed Frankie, a fake name that Armin was using. This may remind some of you about a similar Craigslist ad that I included in a video years ago, asking for volunteers to basically donate their bodies for cannibalistic desires. The only difference is that it's a known fact that this ad had a victim, 43-year-old Bernd Brandes. Brandes stumbled across the ad and reached out to Armin, and they later met at his house. Armin was caught weeks after he and Brandes had met, after putting out an advertisement for a second victim, which was reported by an Austrian student. Armin was arrested, and he confessed to being a cannibal and having chopped Brandes up and eaten him. He said it was something he had wanted to do for a long time. He said to the court on the first day of his trial for murder, "I always had the fantasy, and in the end I fulfilled it." When this went public, everybody who knew Armin was shocked, as he was known as a very polite and likable man. To the family next door, he seemed to be the perfect neighbor. He mowed their lawn, repaired their car, and even invited them around for dinner. Armin had a unique defense in his trial, that his victim actually agreed to be killed and eaten. Though this defense didn't work very well, as he was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Bernd Brandes.
Mein Name ist Armin Maiwas. Ich habe einen Mann auf dessen Wunsch hin getötet, geschlachtet und gegessen.
However, to the dismay and shock of many, Armin is allowed out of prison to go on walks. He's given sunglasses and a cap so that he isn't recognized, and he's taken to towns in different federal states for security reasons, where he walks freely with 2 officers accompanying him from behind. Not so shockingly for this third and last one, we're going back to Craigslist. This was the ad posted to the child care section in Millersburg, Ohio in July of 2021. It read as follows. Titled "Infant Care Available, Millersburg Area." The body read, "Responsible child care provider available," with 7+ years of experience caring for infants/toddler age children. I'm currently not providing care in my own home. I will come to your home. I do not run a daycare. I'm looking for 2 children max that I can provide one-on-one care for. Children must be between the ages of 5 and 9 years old. I do not deal with babies or young toddlers. Flexible schedule available. Weekends and overnights can be arranged. For more information, please contact me. There was a photo of a woman attached that was presumed to be the alleged babysitter. The person who sent this to me didn't want to be named. However, she is a single mother of 2 kids, and she was looking for an affordable, trustworthy babysitter. She found this ad on Craigslist and contacted the person who posted the ad by email since there was no phone number listed. She stated in her original email that she was looking for somebody to watch her 8-year-old twins during the weeknights while she was at work. The person emailed back swiftly, stating she was interested in working for her. The mother wanted to first meet the babysitter beforehand, of course, so she asked for her phone number. She texted the number that was given to her, but after the mother gave the sitter her address, they stopped answering, and it wasn't until later that night that the mother got a text back saying, "Thanks for the address, I'll see you soon," with a winky face. Instantly, the mother tried calling and texting the person, asking what they meant, and then she quickly became defensive when they didn't answer, saying she was calling the police. She then proceeded to block the number and went to the police station. The police weren't of much help though, stating the text wasn't directly a threat, and that she did in fact provide her address for the purpose of meeting. Plus, regardless of what people say, depending on the severity of the situation, the police are rarely willing to just put in the time and resources of tracking a person. The mother left the station feeling as though she had wasted her time. It wasn't until a week later that she woke up to 4 missed calls from a random number with an unfamiliar area code, along with texts that said the following: "I didn't mean to scare you. I really want to watch your kids. Please answer my texts. I'm gonna pay a visit later. Please answer." Not knowing what to do and not feeling confident in going back to the police, she texted back, "I'm not interested, thank you. Please leave me alone." She went ahead and blocked this number too. The mother had the kids sleep in her room that night just to be safe. Around 10 p.m., the doorbell rang. The mother knew it was undoubtedly the person behind that ad who had been harassing her. She quickly rushed to turn off her bedroom light, but apparently by that point it was too late. There was a knocking at the window, and a muffled woman's voice on the other side yelling in to open the window. The mother started to cry, "Leave us alone," and her fear was rubbing off on her children, who they themselves started to get scared and cry. The woman at the window started to shout and bang on the window, cursing and yelling until she threw a stone through the glass, causing it to shatter. The woman then disappeared from the window to never be seen again. The mother immediately called the police this time, getting an official police report with evidence of the harassment. The detective came to the mother's house the next day and assured her he would be on the case, using whatever resources the police department had to trace the woman. After giving the phone numbers and link to the removed Craigslist ad, the detective left. And over a month later now, her case is still open, and she has received little updates on it. When I was 19, I worked as a camp counselor at a summer camp. The job would be to entertain and chaperone a large group of kids with a bunch of other counselors for 3 sessions for the summer. That meant 3 different groups of kids would come at different points in the summer. Each group would come for 2 weeks, which meant I was away from home for this job for a total of 6 weeks. By the time the last group came, summer was more than half over, and I was ready to finish this job and get home. At some point during the second week of the 3rd session and the final week of the job for the season, one of the kids in my group, named Todd, wasn't feeling good, so he wanted to go back to the cabin to go to sleep while everyone else was around the campfire. When we got back to the cabin for 10 to 12-year-old boys, I left Todd to brush up and go to bed. Upon exiting the cabin, a little girl, probably 8 years old, was waiting in front. She wasn't supposed to be in the section, especially not alone at this hour at her age. I asked her where her group was. She didn't answer me. I asked her what her name was. She said Willa. I asked her what her counselors' names were. She didn't answer. I took her hand and brought her into the front section of the cabin. Then I told her to wait there. I started to run across the camp to the other activity sections, hoping to find the girls' group. When I couldn't find them, I ran straight for the section with the girl cabins. I found one of the female counselors with a small group of 7 to 8-year-old girl campers and asked her if she had any girls named Willa in their group. The counselor was certain there was no one with that name in any of the girls' groups, actually. Next thing I did was run back to the boys' cabin where I left the girl, with plans of bringing her to the front office building. When I got back to the cabin, however, she wasn't there. I went towards the back section by the beds and asked Todd if he'd seen a girl walk in there, to which he looked confused and said no. So now in a panic, I ran outside and looked in the immediate area of the cabin for the girl, when suddenly I heard a girl's scream come from the woods. I was beyond shook. I can't even come up with better words to use for how I was feeling when I heard that scream. I wanted to run for help, but I felt like whatever danger she could be in could be time sensitive, so I ran into the woods calling Willa's name. It didn't return any calls back for a while, and I felt like I was hopelessly running into the dark woods, until finally, after some time, and calling the name Willa constantly, there was a scream echoing through the woods, very close this time. I continued a bit further, and there she was, that little girl named Willa. She was standing straight in front of a tree looking at me, as if she were waiting. I told her to come to me in a quiet voice as I slowly approached her, but then she turned and started running. I didn't know why she was running, but I had to follow her. She was surprisingly fast, but I kept up. I saw her slow down and stop ahead, though my vision of her was intruded by a few trees, as it was the whole time I was chasing her. I stopped and hid behind a tree, thinking maybe I could sneak up on her and grab her if I was quiet enough. And I noticed something in the near distance. It was some small, dim red light waving around behind some foliage. The girl then ran over to the light and apparently ducked down out of sight. I was trying to put the pieces together, just as I saw some larger figure emerge from where the girl had just disappeared to. And this figure was crouch walking in my direction. I was able to put 2 and 2 together and assume this was some kind of trap. So I turned and sprinted all the way back to the campgrounds and ran straight for the main office. I spoke with the camp coordinator, Jackie, told her about the suspicious activity that just took place, and advised that all camp activity should be cut short for the night. Any incident like this would be treated very seriously for the safety of the children and the well-being of the camp's reputation. Authorities had been alerted about suspicious activity on the campground. They came, I helped them with their report, and they left. By morning, everything was back to normal. The season was over before we knew it, and that was that. I have my own theories of what I witnessed in the woods that night. The most logical has to be the possibility that a man was using that little girl, maybe his daughter, as some kind of bait to lure unsuspecting victims into the woods. And what would happen next? I have no idea. I'm glad I didn't find out. I've been through a lot of hellish experiences in my life, but this one takes the cake. It was about 20 years ago, so I was, I believe, around 20 years old. This was way before cell phones and navigation garments. I was working off the books for a media company at the time, who were paying me for my photography and videography skills. I had all of the top quality video equipment for the time, which held to today's standards would be like comparing a Nokia to an iPhone. I was being paid to go out into the wilderness and record hours worth of background footage of lakes, trees, etc. They would use this as stock footage for various documentaries and such. I drove about half an hour to find a good place in rural Maryland to do the shoot. Then I parked my car on a dirt road and hiked for a while, finding a few good shooting locations. It was good for me to get sunset and nighttime shots as well, as different times of day created different lighting for the videos. When I figured I had enough, I started packing up my copious amounts of equipment and threw my 2 bags over my shoulders and began walking. And walking. And walking. I started to realize I should have reached the dirt road where my car was by now. There came a time when I had to accept it. I was lost. I had absolutely no way of knowing which way was which. I'd done wilderness shoots before, and never had I run into that problem before, but usually I'd have a compass with me. Not this time. I kept walking for so long it got to the point that I was letting out little cries to myself in stress, wanting nothing more than to just find my car and go home, feeling absolutely helpless. Eventually, after many hours, I came across a small building. It was an old house that appeared to be abandoned in the middle of the woods, indicated by the vines crawling up the sides of the home, plus the broken glass. Continuing to walk around in the woods in the night was the last thing I wanted to do, and seeking refuge for the night made more sense. I walked up the wooden stairs to the front door, which seemed to have already been broken in. All I had to do was push it with a bit of force and I was inside. It was next to pitch black in there, and every step I took, I felt like I was stepping on rubble or trash. I did, however, manage to find the bedroom of the house, which still had a bed in it, mind you, probably a filthy bed at that, but it beat sleeping in the woods or hiking around any longer in the dark. I shut the door and plopped my stuff on the floor and arranged one of my bags to act as a cushion between me and the actual bed itself. Then I tried my best to fall asleep in this dark, abandoned, foreign location in the middle of the woods. It was surreal, and it was scary. The window in the room was broken, so I could hear the wind and bugs outside. But over that, there was the slightest, and I mean slightest little creak from a few feet away from the bed across this tiny bedroom. I looked up, and even though it was dark, I could vaguely see a closet door in the corner. It was moving. It had to be the draft. It had to be. I was letting my paranoia get the better of me in this freakish situation. But then, over the sound of the bugs and wind, I heard something from inside the room now. It was a gurgling type sound, like a throat noise. I looked at the closet again. Something was coming out from the darkness of the closet. I got up to grab my stuff off the ground, and within arm's reach now, I was staring at someone else in this room in this abandoned house in the middle of the forest. Here's my description of what I saw in the brief moments I was staring at this person. I saw a man wearing a woman's wig with some kind of makeup on his face. As for what he was wearing, I didn't really notice that, but I think it was something dark since I couldn't really see it. I grabbed my bags and started saying I'm sorry as I ran out of the house. I didn't know if this was their house or not at the time, but either way I didn't want any trouble. As I ran away from the house, I heard footsteps tailing behind me at first. I think this is when the adrenaline really kicked in, and I suddenly had this insane amount of energy to keep running until I felt I had escaped. And even after that, I kept running, hopping over logs and rocks and twigs, trying to find a road, any road, with the logic that there's only so much forest left in this state, I'd have to run into a road eventually. And finally, I did. I walked down the road, and within 10 minutes, a car passed, and I hitchhiked my way back to my truck. On my way home, I had time to reflect. That house was absolutely abandoned. The door and all the windows were smashed open, there was trash all over the place. I can't use logic to explain it, because it's not explainable. I am grateful I was unharmed, though. My apartment complex sits in a pretty safe neighborhood, so I guess I'm naturally less on guard as far as break-ins and whatever. There was this one night I'd gotten home late from a bar with friends, and though I wasn't very drunk anymore, I was definitely still tipsy. To give a little context on my apartment layout, it's on the ground level and has 2 doors, a front and back. As I entered, I was in the living room, greeted by my dog Chester. Then I passed the living room to walk down a tiny hallway to my room. Chester followed, though he was acting a little weird. I jumped right into bed. I was exhausted. I fell asleep in minutes, and the next thing I remember is waking up to growling. I looked at Chester, who was standing up on my bed, looking at the far corner of the room. I sat up to see what he was looking at, but it was too dark. I had to flip on the lamp. That's when I noticed that he was looking at the closet door, which was cracked open just barely. Right away, I felt a pain in my stomach as I feared the worst. I lightly tapped him to get him to shut up for a second, and he looked at me and went silent. I got out from the bed as he watched me tiptoe closer to the closet. If someone was in there, I had to be ready to defend myself. So instead of opening that door right then and there, I hurried to the kitchen to get a knife. Chester followed me. When I got back into my room, I don't know where it came from. I had a huge bout of confidence overcome me, and I rushed to open the closet door fully. I was shocked, but also relieved to see no one inside. I called Chester an idiot as I went back to the kitchen to put the knife away. When I got back into the room, I saw Chester looking under my bed, growling again. I bent down to take a look, and there was a man hiding under my bed. We made eye contact for a second, and then I grabbed Chester and ran outside to knock on the neighboring apartment's door. My neighbor opened in his pajamas, and I begged him to let me in after explaining that someone was in my apartment. He let me in immediately and let me use his phone to call the police. The intruder wasn't in the apartment anymore by the time the police came and searched the place. If it weren't for my tiny little chihuahua who couldn't harm a fly, I may not have come out of this in one piece.
This video topic is gaming horror stories, and this video is appropriately sponsored by Opera GX. I spent a lot of time finding stories trying to scare you guys, but did you know default browsers are scaring your computer resources? Opera GX is on a mission to get people to break up with boring browsers like Chrome, Edge, and Safari. With the GX control feature, you can enhance performance on your PC when gaming with your browser open, and get rid of lag while playing games and listening to music. Perfect for when you want to keep a bunch of tabs open to not lose them, but you don't want your browser to hurt your gaming performance. The panel lets users limit the amount of CPU or RAM they're willing to let their browser use. My personal favorite feature is GX Mods. Opera GX offers you a lot of customization. It can actually be overwhelming. However, with GX Mods, you can now find ways to flip your entire browser 180 with one click and change pretty much anything you want. If you want to hear a ghost wailing anytime you click the search button, or you want to turn your entire browser into an arcade, it's easy. Choose one of the many mods already added to the browser, or create a completely new one that suits you best. Opera GX is also equipped with an import tool that allows you to quickly import all your settings from your previous browser to Opera GX, like browsing history, bookmarks, and cookies. It's also compatible with every Google Chrome extension. So while classic horror movie tropes like running upstairs when chased are pretty boring, cliche, and worn out, that doesn't mean your browser has to be too. So if you're interested, use my link below to download Opera GX today. I live in Chandler, Arizona. This happened when I was like 17 and in my heavy gaming phase, still living with my parents. I played a lot of Call of Duty in my room on my computer in those days, especially in the summertime when it's so unbearably hot outside and I prefer to stay inside in the air conditioning anyway. Back when I lived at home, I'd have the place to myself a lot because my parents travel a lot and I was the last one to move out. If I recall correctly, this was on a Friday night, or a night that school was out the next day because I was staying up late. After I got home from school, I submitted a paper that was due that night to get it over with. Then I had to do some shopping afterwards on my mom's orders since they'd be gone for a while. It was how I earned my keep in the house, according to my dad. They left cash for me to use. I always had to show them the receipt though, so that I wouldn't just pocket any of the money. My mom gave me a shopping list, so I went to Whole Foods in my old Camry, my first car. Shopping took about an hour door to door. While in the grocery store, this guy online behind me started talking to me, and I don't know why. He made a comment about one of the things I was buying and just wouldn't stop. Even as I was bagging my groceries, he kept talking to me, which I found weird.
He wasn't paying attention to anyone else. I was still nice though. When it was time to leave, I said have a good one and left. I went out to my car in the parking lot and packed the trunk, then headed home. It was a scorching hot day, as we were in early June. I wasn't looking to go out and do anything outside once I was done with everything I needed to do. It was dark out by now, so I got right on Call of Duty Black Ops on my computer and texted my friend Johnny to get on as well. He joined my party, and we played some team deathmatch as we always did. I was using my noise-canceling Logitech headset. We were committed already to playing Call of Duty all night and ranking up, so of course I needed to take a break to make dinner at some point. Probably 2 hours into playing, I told Johnny I was going to eat dinner and I'd probably be back on in an hour. He said he'd be back on later too. So with that, I took a break and made some pasta for dinner. The kitchen is downstairs and my room is upstairs. While I was sitting in the kitchen eating, I knew for sure I heard a thump from upstairs. Did it sound like a footstep? I wasn't sure. It could have been any number of things, but the last thing I'd imagine it would be a footstep. I did, however, go and lock the front door now. Oftentimes for a while I would leave the door unlocked just because my parents' house is in a good side of town, and I just never took the idea of a break-in seriously. It's something you hear about on the news, but don't think it'll ever happen to you. I went upstairs, and I don't know what I was expecting, but I said my brother Tristan's name into the hallway. I knew he wasn't supposed to be here, but I don't know. I heard a sound, and I felt the urge to see if anyone was here. When no one answered back, I went back to my room and got back on Call of Duty. I put my headset back on and texted Johnny that I'm going back on. Shortly after he came back on, we started playing team deathmatch again. A couple games in, I looked to my left at the doorway of my room into the hallway. I don't know if something in my peripheral vision or some other sense felt something there, but I would leave the door open when I was home alone, as my mom would tell me to. The hallway was dark except for the one little nightlight plugged into an outlet. My room shone blue from my wall lights. Some of the blue poured into the part of the hallway closest to my room. In between the crack of the door was total blackness. I couldn't see through it. I didn't think anything of it. After our next game, Johnny said he was taking a leak and walked away while we were in the lobby. I looked at my phone, then looked back out to the hallway, and I noticed something was different. Now I could see through the crack of the door into the hallway. My first thought was someone blocking it just minutes ago? By instinct, I spun my chair around to face the bed behind me, and there was a man sitting on my bed, with his freakishly upright posture, and his hands resting on his thighs. He almost looked to be smiling. I was so alarmed I jumped out of my seat onto the desk and crawled onto the desk, causing my monitor and basically everything else to fall off of it. I screamed, "What do you want?" And he started to actually smile now, showing his teeth, like he was laughing. I ran out of the room into the hallway. I stopped halfway down the hallway and looked back at my bedroom door. I heard the springs of my bed lifting, and then the guy slowly walked into the doorway and stopped. He stood there. I once again yelled, "What do you want?" He then spoke in a stuttered, slow voice, asking if he could play too. I asked, "How did you get in here?" He stepped a few steps forward and pointed down the stairs. I assume he was implying he entered through the front door. I was at a loss for what to do, so I ran down the stairs to the landline phone, as my cell phone was still in my room. I grabbed the phone and a kitchen knife and screamed, "You need to leave, I'm calling 911. I heard footsteps walking down the steps, and the last time I saw the guy was when he walked past the kitchen, looked at me, and then I heard him walking out the front door. I ran to slam it shut and lock it. For the first time ever, I was ashamed at myself for leaving the door completely unlocked. I held the phone for a few minutes, deciding whether to tell my parents. Ultimately, I did. My mom was concerned at first, then grew livid, so much so to the point that she put my dad on the phone. He told me to go through the house and make sure nothing was taken. I went through every room, and honestly, everything seemed in place. I said the man seemed like something was off about him, and my dad said, "Yeah, no shit." The man didn't seem overtly hostile, but something was wrong with him, and I don't know what his intention was. The image of him sitting on my bed, and the realization that he was watching me through the crack in the door, was haunting enough. This is a story I'm not proud of, mostly for my naivety. When I was in middle school and early high school, I didn't know how to talk to girls at all at school, but that's a lot of boys in middle school. I wasn't shy in general. I had friends and did normal things an 8th grader would do. I just had never kissed a girl or anything. Some of my friends at the time claimed they've already gone further than that with girls, and I was starting to feel pressure. But I was still having trouble approaching girls in that way. The mentality went from boys making fun of girls to suddenly liking them in a matter of like a year. I was a pretty big gamer in middle school and early high school. This was when I was in 8th grade. I was like 13. My voice was still probably a bit prepubescent sounding. It was 2010. I played a lot of console games and computer MMORPG games. My favorite console games at the time were GTA 4 and Call of Duty, and my favorite computer game was this MMORPG called Gunzu. It was this online game where you would level up by killing monsters, and the more you leveled up, the higher level monsters and hunting grounds you'd be able to tackle. The online community in this game was very active, and there were tons of players. My older brother used to play it a little bit too. I played it more for sure though. I was in a guild and town and everything. I don't remember how it happened, but I befriended this female player who was a higher level than me. Her username was Medusa. Anytime I'd sign in and she was on, she'd message me, and vice versa. We would join parties together, which meant we'd share EXP on whatever monsters we killed, and we'd just chat for hours. She knew a lot about me, including my age, my town, and some personal family details. She would open up to me too. Eventually she told me her name was Teresa. It was weird feeling such a connection with a girl who really you knew nothing about her appearance or her voice. It truly was like having a pen pal, but better. It was interesting enough that we both lived in New York State. She lived about an hour from me. After a few weeks, or maybe even a month, we started talking about maybe meeting one day. To do this though, we'd have to exchange numbers. At the time I didn't actually have a cell phone yet. I only had an iPod Touch. But I was able to download some texting app that allowed me to send messages to people with cell phones. Through this app, I was able to send her a picture of myself. It was definitely this cringy 8th grade boy selfie of me trying to look good looking. She called me cute, and then she sent back a picture of herself. She looked a couple years older than me, like 15, which was the age she told me she was. Based on the picture, I found her very attractive. This was around the time our messages became more flirtatious and romantic. But we were both minors, and so of course neither of us could just go drive an hour away. However, she apparently had a solution for this. She told me her sister had friends that lived around me anyway, and she could probably get a ride to me. This was exciting news for my little 13-year-old self. I wanted to wait for a day and night that my parents wouldn't be home and I'd have the house to myself, which was about a week later, I believe. My parents were going to the Hamptons for the whole weekend, so it would just be my brother and I home. My brother was 18, so I asked him to please just go out for the night with friends so that I could be alone with Teresa. I gave Teresa my address and told her to come that Saturday whenever she wanted. She said she'd be coming a little later, like at night. She didn't give me an exact time. At that point in time, we still had never spoken on the phone. I still hadn't heard her voice. I was so nervous all day that I couldn't even play video games. I was busy cleaning my room, making things look cool, fixing my appearance, even rehearsing things to say in the initial moments of meeting. Then I got a message from Teresa saying she's here. I sprang up and ran to the front door. I looked through the peephole and didn't see anyone. She then said you can come out to the front door. I opened the door and stepped onto the front porch. I looked around and the street was dark and quiet. No cars, no people. I went back inside and shut the door. I messaged her back saying I don't see you. She said back, oh, I must have the wrong house. Give me a minute. That was a bit weird. I locked the door and sat on the living room couch, nervously waiting, playing games on my iPod. I got a message from her again. She said she's here and to come outside. I replied, ring the bell so I know you're at the right house. Then the doorbell rang. My nerves really set in now. I walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and didn't see anyone. I said, Teresa, through the door. Through the peephole, I saw a hand reach towards the door and knock. I said Teresa again, as I kept looking through the peephole. Everything felt like it instantly crumbled down on top of me, as this bald, creepy-looking short guy stepped in front of the peephole, and then said through the door, hey Joey, it's Medusa from Gunzu. I want to talk. I ran away from the door with my hands over my mouth, truly speechless. The person I'd been talking to all this time was a creepy grown man. I was disgusted and scared. I went to call my brother's cell phone. He didn't pick up. The doorbell kept ringing.
I went to my bedroom and locked myself in. I held the house phone in my grasp, considering calling my parents, but too embarrassed to do so. My room was the only other room in the house with the lights on. I have a big window in my room that overlooks the whole side yard of our corner house. I turned off my lamp and slightly kinked the blind just a crack, and I saw that guy on the other side trying to look in. He started to knock on the window and started saying through the closed window how much of a connection we clearly have and that we can at least be friends. I responded nothing. I called my brother again, and he picked up this time. I said, please come home right now. The Teresa person was a grown man the entire time, and he's at my window right now. My brother's always been pretty big, even as a teenager. I'd feel safer with him being here. He said he was coming home with his friends right now. We stayed on the phone so I could tell him if anything happened. I ran to my parents' bedroom upstairs and hid there. The man was blowing up my message app, saying he would like to talk and there's a reason he had to lie about who he was. When my brother got home, he told me he sees the guy outside. My brother and his 3 friends confronted the creepy short man outside, so I went outside now to watch. The 4 of them intimidated the man, calling him a sick fuck and such. And the man's defense was that he was concerned for my well-being, inviting strangers from online over, and that this was supposed to be a learning lesson. I refuted this claim by asking him why he would say that we could be good friends at my window. When my brother and his friends started pushing the man, he started quickly walking to his car. My brother kicked the guy's taillight, while one of his friends threw a rock at his window. He sped off down the road to never be seen again. This was humiliating and disturbing, but at the same time, I was really grateful of my brother and his friends to come to my aid. They potentially saved me from a seriously sick creep breaking into the house. It's still painful and uncomfortable, realizing all that time I spent opening up to who I thought was a girl my own age on a game was some creepy grown man with a different agenda.
This happened last week. Just a bit of background information. I had just officially quit playing Fortnite. Not that it's important, but this was May 2021. So Fortnite had already had a lot of people quitting the game. My friend Brandon suggested that I download Apex Legends and play with him. I had already had the game downloaded, so I just updated it to the current version. So I logged on, and I remembered how bad I was at this game. I hadn't played since the game came out, so my stats were awful, and I had only the starting Legends. I mained Pathfinder and Bloodhound because I just thought that they were the 2 best starters. Something else to note, I have a very loud gaming headset, so I could barely hear any background noise. But to get to the actual story, it happened when I was home alone. My parents had gone out for their week-late anniversary dinner, and my brother was at his friend's house. I was playing Apex with Brandon, when he suddenly got a text from a random number. He said, "Dude, what the fuck, I just got a random message." "What does it say?" I asked. I remember exactly how it went. He said, "Look out the window." "Don't look out the window, dude, there's nothing there," I replied. "No," he says, "look out your window." "What? Why?" I said, as I turned my head slightly to the right, then to the left. I didn't know which window to look out of since this room has 5 windows. I looked at each of them in a panic. Then I found it. The one that was least visible from my couch. There was this man just standing there. I was clueless. I didn't think much of it because the dude was facing away from the window. Little did I know just yet. I put my headphones back on. Brandon just got another text. He told me, "Luke, I'm not messing with you. Dude, there's someone outside your window." "I know," I told him. "I just saw him. He's just looking the other way." "What?" he asked. "He just took a picture of you at the window looking clueless." "What the fuck?" I said. "I suggest you call the cops and get him out of there," he tells me. Then, strangely, he stopped talking, and there was that sound of an Xbox notification. He left the party. He never does that without saying bye or that he's going to bed, and I saw he was still in Apex playing in a match. What the fuck, I muttered to myself again. Eventually I got a party invitation from Brandon, and asked what happened. Next thing I know, there was a deeper voice than Brandon's on the mic. I remember in every little detail what it said. "Come outside right now, or I will come in." I couldn't recognize the voice at all, but I knew the voice was that of a grown man. I looked back at the window, and sure enough, there he was banging on the window. He looked completely demented. His face was a dark red, with his hands gushing blood. As he pounded on the window, it started to crack. I picked up my phone, which was right next to me. I was horrified to see it was at 1%, basically out of battery. I kept saying "oh shit" over and over. I put my phone to my ear and mouthed the words, "There's a man trying to break into my house. His face is dark red and his hands are bleeding." Next thing I know, he starts screaming while bashing at my window. Then I thought, wait a second. There's screen sheets in front of all of our windows. So how, if he never cut it, was he already at the glass? I took too much time to think. Finally, a shard of glass falls to the ground. A hole large enough for me to shout through opens up. I screamed, "Go the f*** away before the cops get here, you son of a bitch." I used too much breath on those words. Another shard falls, then another. I went to get a large knife from the knife block we have in the kitchen, and I returned to where the man was breaking the window. There was already a hole big enough for him to crawl through, and he had already started. I ran back to the kitchen and grabbed the cordless phone, ran upstairs and dialed 911. I told them the exact words that I mouthed on my cell phone earlier, along with the fact that he was now inside my home. Unfortunately, the only doors with locks upstairs are the bathrooms, so thinking on my feet, I went into my parents' room, into that bathroom, and locked the door. At that moment, I was thinking I was being smart because I left the bedroom door wide open, and the bathroom door that's actually inside the bedroom is not visible from the bedroom door. I thought if that guy managed to come upstairs before the cops got here, he would see the door wide open and think I wasn't in here. Suddenly, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. My heart started pounding harder than ever, and it got harder to breathe. I opened one of the drawers looking for something sharp that I could maybe use as a weapon, and I think he must have heard the drawer, because he came stomping into the bedroom. I heard sirens outside, and I never could have thanked the cops enough for being so fast. He heard it too, and at this point he had nowhere to go. I heard him run outside, but he was too late. The police were out front already. I ran outside to the police as well, and I told them what happened. The man was arrested, handcuffs put around his bloodied wrists. I later figured out that I had killed that guy in Apex and kind of shit-talked him just an hour or two before. Somehow he got my address and Brandon's phone number. Some people are just fucked up in the head, and apparently they will do unspeakable things for video games. Everyone gets frustrated from getting killed in a game, but really, showing up at a person's house to potentially kill them in real life over a game is really messed up. This guy had to be mental. A few police cars stayed at my house overnight after the others had taken the man away. The man was convicted for aggravated burglary.
When somebody goes hunting, they're normally right smack in the middle of a forest or the woods, completely devoid of other people. Seems like the perfect setting for a horror story, right? These 3 supposedly true stories will show you just what can go wrong while hunting. This first story was submitted to me in June by somebody named Robert Scherneman. His story takes place upstate New York, a place I'm familiar with. Here's his story. I've been a passionate hunter ever since my dad before me started taking me out on trips every Saturday, and I thought I would pass down the same tradition to my son. During the setting of this story, my son Peter was 10 years old. I figured that was a good age to introduce him to the world of hunting. I armed Peter and myself with Remington Model 798 sniper rifles, however I carried it until I found the spot where I usually find game. We could have used the deer hunting tower hidden deeper in the woods, but I figured that wouldn't be the best first time experience. I handed him the gun when we were set up. I had already taught him the basics of firearms, so it wasn't like I was taking him out there with no experience. I chose to stay put the first time as it would be easier for him, and I figured I would move up to the more advanced methods of hunting in the future sessions. There was a lot of waiting, more waiting than usual in this certain spot. I could see Peter was getting bored, constantly yawning and sighing, and that disappointed me. I didn't want him to think this sport was that boring, so I packed up our stuff and told him we're moving. He seemed to perk up a bit with excitement, and that made me happy. As soon as we began walking, I heard footsteps. I put my arm in front of Peter silently and motioned for him to raise his gun. He did with excitement, until I spotted someone's head peer out from around a tree in the distance. I pushed the gun down immediately, a bit disappointed, but also relieved that Peter didn't shoot. I gave him a quick little apologetic wave, and with that, he disappeared back behind the tree out of sight. Was he another hunter? I couldn't tell, but from what I saw of him, even in the distance, there was something off-putting about his face. I couldn't put my finger on what it was at that moment. Seeing somebody this deep into the woods was rare and also strange, and this guy didn't exactly look like a hunter. So, as a safety precaution, I suppose, I steered Peter in the other direction. Still no sign of any deer. Peter asked me about the man, like who I thought he was, for example, as expected, and I just told him I didn't know, and I didn't think we should get closer. I didn't want to lie to him. A few minutes later, Peter started complaining that he was hungry. I was getting pretty hungry myself, so we stopped and unpacked our snacks. I was extremely disappointed that nothing had happened by now. While eating my sandwich, I heard footsteps again in the distance. Peter did too, as he immediately picked up his rifle and pointed it in that direction. I felt my heart drop when I could see the same man from before peering out from another tree at us. I lowered Peter's gun again, and I noticed he seemed a bit uncomfortable now, as was I. I told him to wait there while I began to walk over to the man, trying to emotionally prepare myself to confront him. About halfway over, I stopped and thought to myself, what the hell am I doing? My son is right over there. I turned around and hurried back to Peter, telling him it's time to go. If you had your son in the middle of the woods and you thought you were being stalked, odds are you would just want to get out of there too. We were not running, we were merely walking back to the road. I was mentally waiting for a twig snap or a leaf crunch from behind us, and when it happened, I nudged Peter to go along ahead. I angrily turned around and stormed towards the man, who was once again peering from behind a tree. I'd say when I got within 30 feet from the tree, he moved back behind the tree out of sight, and then I heard a thud, as if something were just dropped onto the ground. I had my gun loaded in my hand as I cautiously walked up to the tree. I didn't even say a word. I don't know why. All I did was slowly creep up to the tree, and when I got there, I felt as if everything around me had completely collapsed, or rather ceased to exist, and all that I could focus on was the head laying face first on the ground in front of me. No body, just head. I didn't even look up or around the tree to see who had dropped it there. I just full on sprinted back to Peter and told him to run. We made it back home safely within 5 minutes, and I made 100% sure we weren't followed. However, I stayed up the whole night keeping watch for the sake of my family's safety. I found out the next day through my wife that there had been 2 disappearances of local hunters, and that's when I called the police and reported what I had experienced. I had to, of course, play it safe for a long time, at least a few months, before taking my son out again. What baffles me, though, is how this person managed to kill 2 hunters who obviously had to be armed with some kind of weapon. I have since resumed hunting with my son. The next story was submitted to me just a month ago by Nathan Zielinski, and it's more of a mix between a camping and a hunting story. Here it is. It was my first time hunting. I was 21, going with my friends Anthony, Christian, Tom, and his girlfriend Diana to some park in Colorado to go elk hunting. We brought 2 separate tents that were relatively large, sleeping bags, 2 days worth of food and drinks, and of course, guns. I couldn't even tell you the name of the gun Anthony handed me. It was just a basic looking hunting rifle. Honestly, I didn't know how I felt about the whole thing. Killing a living, breathing animal that has just as much of a will to live as me, merely for so-called fun, didn't seem cool to me. But it was like the 5th time Anthony offered, and I felt like I had to say yes. I decided I wouldn't shoot any animals about halfway through the car ride. Anthony pulled into a lot, we unpacked the car, and proceeded to hike about a mile into the woods before setting up camp. First thing after setting up camp, we all followed Anthony's lead as he proudly babbled on about hunting techniques. I wished I had someone to laugh about it with, but everyone else seemed serious about it as well. I tried busting Anthony's chops by asking him, wouldn't it be better to stop talking if you don't want to scare away any potential prey? He got pissed. I could tell he took this really seriously, and from there on, I shut up. And by there on, I mean however long things were going normal, and that wasn't long. During our hunt, we ran into a rather strange group of people, 3 rather large, dirty men with long, sticky hair. They looked like they belonged to some kind of inbreeding house deep in the woods. They looked at us and sort of nodded their heads as if to say hello as we passed by them, one by one. We were officially freaked out. It might sound like something that would be laughable, but under the circumstances, it was horrifying. We were deep in the woods, far from the lot, which was, for the record, completely empty, and it may sound exaggerated, but these 3 looked like creepy lowlives who could be dangerous. Thankfully, though, they didn't follow us, which allowed for us to peacefully go on with our hunt. Anthony ended up killing a deer. We didn't find any elks. We dragged the deer all the way back to our campsite, and that was actually our dinner for the night. Anthony and Tom went through a disgusting, bloody process of skinning, and I'm pretty sure gutting the deer, but I didn't watch for more than a few seconds. Anthony made us venison burgers. He came prepared with the buns and everything. While I didn't particularly agree with the sport, I was impressed with Anthony. We went to sleep first thing at dark with the fire still going outside. I was having a really bad time trying to get comfortable in that sleeping bag. Anthony and Christian seemed to fall asleep quickly, while I, on the other hand, had to be rolling around for at least 2 hours. I've always had a hard time falling asleep in sleeping bags. I was actually about to get up and go outside to pee when I heard footsteps coming from outside the tent. I opened my mouth to call out Tom or Diana's name, but I realized, what if it wasn't them? I laid silently and listened. In an unexpected instant, the zipper to our tent got pulled down, and I threw my head down to the side and acted as if I were asleep. There was a short pause before the zipper got pulled back up. I waited until the pairs of footsteps moved away. They seemed to be moving to Tom and Diana's tent. Then I realized it must have been them, and they must have been checking if we were asleep so they could, mess around, I guess. So I decided to play a little joke on them. I gave it about 5 minutes before I unzipped the tent and began creeping over to their tent. Then I realized their zipper was still undone. That's strange, I thought to myself. I crept over expecting to scare the 2 lovebirds, but instead, when I got close enough, I saw 2 men inside of the tent doing something to Diana. At that moment, I screamed as loud as I could, mostly out of fear, but also to wake everyone up. Anthony and Christian stormed out from the tent with their rifles. When the 2 men fled from the tent, I realized something. They were the same 2 men we had seen earlier. Tom and Anthony fired rounds in their direction to scare them off. However, something even more horrifying happened after that. After they shot their rounds, we all looked around us completely horrified as men in almost all directions who were previously hiding in bushes and behind trees were taking off in different directions. We tried waking up Tom and Diana, but they seemed to have been injected with some kind of tranquilizers by the men. We had no choice but to wait until they woke up, which took about maybe half an hour. Running back to the car in that pitch-black forest was one of the most horrifying moments of my life. We don't know who all those people were. They could have been part of some secluded inbreeding house for all we knew, or even some kind of cannibalistic family. We have no idea what they were planning on doing with Tom and Diana, but we're just happy we all got out of there safely. This last story was written by Jared the Sprinter, and he shares his night hunting experience. I was doing some night hog hunting in the woods near my backyard. I was hiding in the tower I had built about a decade ago. In case anyone's wondering, I of course had a night vision scope attachment. I guess I'm what you would consider a hardcore hunter. I don't want to bore you with the unnecessary story prolonging details, so I'll make this short. And I want everyone to know that though I agree this story sounds far-fetched and crazy, it is nothing but the truth. And I in a way actually consider myself lucky that I'll always have such a horrifying story to share. So, while I was sitting in the tower waiting for movement, it finally came. I took aim and found the source. But it wasn't at all a hog, or any kind of animal I was expecting. It was a person, a man wearing all black. Black sweatpants, black shoes, and a black hoodie with the hood over his head. But that wasn't the freakiest part. He was dragging a sack behind him. My heart started racing. I was pretty sure I was witnessing this guy trying to bury a body. I continued to watch him, but then he slowed down, and I swear to God, it looked as if he turned his head up to me. I ducked down under the wooden walls of the tower, shaking in my boots. Yes, I had a gun, but just the idea of using it against a person is horrifying. I lay low, praying to God that he hadn't seen me. It wouldn't make sense if he could, though. It's practically pitch black out here, or at least that was my logic. Seconds felt like an eternity as I waited for the footsteps in the leaves to move elsewhere, but I didn't hear any footsteps. All I heard was the sound of a foot hitting one of the wooden planks on the ladder of the tower. I felt the entire tower vibrate and shake as there were 2 more steps moving up the ladder. At this point, I was asking myself deep down, am I going to be able to shoot someone? But for some reason, whoever was down there decided not to climb all the way up, as I heard them jump back down to the forest ground and began dragging the sack away. I think I stayed frozen like a statue for at least 10 minutes before even peeking over the ledge again. The coast seemed clear. I had to get home and warn the police immediately. I hopped over the ledge and descended down the ladder. I turned on my pocket flashlight, which in hindsight was a stupid move considering the situation, and ran back in the direction of my house. I was only able to run for about 10 seconds or so when I heard the rapid, manic footsteps crunching the leaves from behind me. I took a look over my shoulder, and there he was, inches away from my face. I spun around and shot him in the shoulder. He stopped and screamed in agony, and I took that moment to finish my dash to my house. Again, in hindsight, I should have held him hostage somehow, but that doesn't even matter now. I called the police, who showed up within 15 minutes with a whole search squad, and I led them all into the woods to the exact location where I shot him. There was a faint yet noticeable blood trail spilled onto the leaves, which led past the body bag, which the cops seized, and eventually right to the maniac, who was hiding under a log next to a tree. He was arrested and tried for the murder of Jinkwen Sakanaki, a Japanese corner store owner. I don't know the full story behind it, but I do know I won't forget this one for the rest of my life, and I'll also be telling it for the rest of my life.
It was December 31st, New Year's Eve. My friend Alex hired me to watch his dog Bailey for the weekend while he was out of town for the new year. I'm 35, he's 27, so I don't have that same urge to go out and party for New Year's Eve like he does. So I was more okay with making some money and taking it easy for the night. New Year's Eve was on a Saturday. He left for the city early in the day when I got there. He'd be back Sunday night. He left me with very basic instructions: to just feed him and walk him twice a day and keep him off the furniture. Bailey is a very small husky mix. I'm not sure what else she is, but she's about a third the size of a regular husky, and she's very quiet and well behaved. Hence why Alex was okay with me watching her instead of a dog sitter. I brought a backpack which contained my laptop, charger, toiletries, and a change of clothes for Sunday. Alex and I don't go way back. We met through mutual friends and had started going out occasionally on the weekends ever since. I would be sleeping in the spare bedroom of his house on the futon. Throughout the day, I just did stuff on my laptop and played some of Alex's video games. Later in the night, I invited my girl over with Alex's permission. His response was, "You better not f*** in my bed," a way of jokingly saying yes, she can come over. She said she'd be getting out of work after 12, but then she'd come straight over. Alex's house is about half an hour from us, so my girl Trisha wouldn't be getting there until late. I had to kill the time alone with Bailey watching movies until then. We were in the living room, and Bailey was by my feet. It was probably 9 p.m. when the doorbell rang. I went to answer the door, and it was a girl at the door. She looked about 30. She had a hoodie on and was holding a jacket. She introduced herself as Alex's girlfriend and said she left something here that she needed to grab. I offered to grab it if she wanted, and she said no, it's okay. She knew where it was in his room. I said okay, that's fine, and let her inside. She went straight upstairs to Alex's room and slightly closed the door behind her without latching it. I right away texted Alex, I didn't know you had a girlfriend. She was in there for quite some time, until she came back out, still holding her jacket. She came back down the stairs and thanked me and was going straight for the door. I tried to stop her for a quick conversation, saying, how long have you guys been dating? And she said, too long, then laughed, as if making a joke. I laughed too, and then she said, have a good night. I was a bit surprised by the interaction, but what I gathered from it was they had probably just recently broken up. Now I started to worry that maybe I shouldn't have let her in. Since Alex hadn't answered my text yet, I called him a few times before he picked up. He was out with his friends in a loud setting, so he could hardly hear me until he went outside to talk. I told him his girlfriend just came by to grab something, and he was completely bewildered at what I was saying. Who are you talking about? He said. I responded, she said she was your girlfriend. I didn't get a name. He said in a yell, you know I don't have a girlfriend. What did she look like? I started to feel really stupid just about now. I described the girl, and he said he had no idea who this could have been. I then proceeded to explain to him that she went upstairs to his room for a few minutes, then came back down. This was when he started freaking out. He told me to go up to his room now and check if she stole anything. Of course, I didn't know what was in his room beforehand, so he had me check for specific things, which all appeared to still be there. He tried hard to figure out who it could have been, and said he'd call me back after he made some calls and sent me some pictures of different girls. Understandably, this was putting a damper on his night. I could tell he'd already been drinking, so I felt awfully stupid for letting some random girl into the house. He started sending me screenshots of different girls' Instagram accounts, none of them resembling the girl who came in. When I said no to all of them, he went silent for an hour. Then he texted me randomly, I think I know who it was. Make sure she doesn't come back. I didn't ask any further questions. I responded, okay, my bad, and left it at that. Clearly Alex was going through some serious girl drama, or so I thought. I watched the ball drop alone. Not that I really care about the new year or the ball drop at all. Later that night, Trisha finally made it over, and so we hung out in the living room together. I told her what happened, and she was shocked. But then a freakish coincidence happened. Bailey lifted her head and looked at the front door, and then there was a knocking at the door. Whoever it was didn't ring the bell. There was no shot I was opening it. I called Alex a bunch of times, but he didn't pick up. He was wasted and didn't even feel his phone vibrating. Trisha and I stayed quiet, and eventually whoever it was went away. I was honestly unnerved now. Surely it was in connection to whoever that girl was earlier. Maybe it was even her again. Either way, I didn't want to get involved any further in what was going on. After this, we decided to migrate to the spare bedroom where we'd stay for the night on the futon. We had a movie on as we laid down and I held her. We fell asleep in this position and woke up at some unknown hour in the night, which I later found out was less than an hour after we fell asleep. I woke to Bailey's howling. She was in the room with us. Trisha woke up after me. Bailey was at the bedroom door with her tail wagging, howling. I whispered, Bailey, shush. She looked at me and then came over, but she stayed staring at the door, now growling, making unhappy whimpering sounds. Then there were footsteps outside on the wood floors. We heard what had to be at least 2 pairs of footsteps, tiptoeing to the door, and then the doorknob twisted. By force of habit, we had the door locked, thankfully, and a girl's voice said, Alex? I looked at Trisha and signaled for her to stay quiet. That girl was not alone. Another light tap at the door, and then the girl's voice said, Who's in there? This is Alex's house. I made the decision to say in a loud voice, almost a yell, The cops have been on their way for a few minutes now, just so you know. The girl said, Who are you? I didn't bite. I whispered to Trisha to actually call the police, and she did. The entire time she whispered into the phone. I said loud and clear, I dare you to do something, because the time you do it, the cops will be running through the front door. I heard a whisper on the other side of the door. Then, multiple pairs of footsteps walking away from the door. We stayed in the room, waiting for the cops to get there. Since the front door was left wide open by those people, the cops came right in. The house was clear by this point. I gave my entire recount of the story, and then called Alex multiple times until he finally picked up, still sounding pretty drunk. One cop talked with him on the phone for a few minutes, while I sat with Trisha speaking with another cop. After all this was said and done, the accepted assumption was that there was a key in Alex's room taken by that girl from hours before. This was a pretty messy situation since Alex couldn't just come all the way home this late. He practically begged me to stay the rest of the night. I had Trisha go home. I stayed because I felt responsible for letting that girl in the first place. I stayed locked in that room the rest of the night with Bailey. I literally wedged a chair against the front door, some half-assed attempt at keeping them out if they decided to return. By morning, though, it seemed that they didn't return. Alex came back earlier that day than originally planned. I'm not going to air out any more private information to the internet than I already have, just in case anyone who knows him can figure out this story is about him. But he did tell me who he thought the girl was, and the story behind it proves that men have to be careful too with the women they choose to interact with. That girl and whoever was with her's intention of breaking in wasn't to steal anything evidently, which is the scariest part. He changed his locks ASAP. I can't even imagine staying in that house if I were him after this. However, it's been a year, and as far as I know, nothing has happened, unless he's keeping more to the story he told me a secret. After returning from a night to celebrate the arrival of the new year, my husband and I returned to our apartment complex to turn in for the night. We both had a couple of drinks, but neither of us were intoxicated. As much as we enjoy partying with friends, when it comes down to it, we are really just homebodies. We lived in the corner penthouse suite of our complex. Although this was never confirmed, it was suspected the owners wanted to convert this apartment complex into condos. The rent certainly was not cheap, and access was limited to this floor. Upon entering the building, there is a walk-up, 2 secure doors, and every now and then, there would be a doorman to greet you as you entered or exited. There were also multiple security cameras placed throughout and around the building. It was an especially cold evening, and when we returned, there was no doorman present. It was late, at least 2 a.m. The foyer was empty, and one of the lights flickered softly. My husband and I entered the elevator and pressed the button to the top floor. The elevator ride was smooth, and as we ascended, I could feel myself becoming more relaxed, excited to finally be home and able to rest. My feet were killing me from wearing heels all night in the bitter cold. The bell chimed, signaling we had reached our floor. The door slid open, and we turned the corner to the left. Like I said, our suite was the corner suite at the end of the hall. However, something caught our eye. A woman, or what at least looked like a woman, was meandering through the hallway. Her hair was dark and scattered. It looked to be matted and covered her face. She wore a black lace dress that was torn and looked to be in bad shape. Thinking back, I don't even think she had any footwear on. We assumed she was intoxicated and was having difficulty finding her suite. Although on closer inspection, she didn't look familiar. We knew all of our neighbors, as like I said, access was limited on this floor. I looked at my husband, who stood still as well. I could see he was contemplating the same thoughts. I asked him, should we ask if she needs help? He looked at me and said, just wait, maybe she's just drunk and having a hard time finding her suite. The woman just continued to slowly slide herself along the walls of the hallway, stopping at each door and peering through the exterior peepholes. Admittedly, this was creepy, but it just added to the theory that she was a drunk woman looking for her friends. She was humming, or what I believe was humming. The sound was something between a growl and a hum. We stood there in utter disbelief and awe. However, there was a veil of tension and uneasiness that lingered. The strange woman stumbled through the hallway, hunched over until she pulled herself up to peer through the peephole. She eventually got to a suite of an elderly lady, whom I have a strong connection with. We'll just call her Tilly. Tilly was the sort of woman whose family had neglected her and rarely visited. She would bring my husband and I baked goods from time to time. I would bring her leftovers and assist her with groceries and medication frequently. Tilly's smoke alarm would constantly go off. I would have to rush over and pull out the smoldering toast from her toaster and fan her smoke alarm until it stopped beeping. At times a nuisance, but it would always turn into tea time. Nevertheless, I cared about Tilly, so when I saw this strange woman peer into her peephole, I reacted. I blurted out, "Excuse me, are you alright?" I could feel myself lose confidence as I asked. The strange woman seemed to shudder for a moment and hunched over to the floor. She looked like she was about to puke or was frightened by my voice. My husband and I stepped closer, but the woman then let out a series of soft and menacing laughs, just barely audible. I have to admit, in this moment I was thoroughly creeped out and reached for my cell phone. It was uncomfortable because we couldn't get to our suite without having to walk right past this deranged woman. My husband said, "Hey, did you hear us? Do you need help?" Her laugh began to grow into what was a steady cackle. The strange woman then stood up. As she stood up, her cackle became a mixture between a cackle and a boisterous growl. She then stumbled forward and continued walking down the hall. There was a staircase just outside of our suite. I assumed she was making her way to the stairs, just too embarrassed to walk past us to the elevator. Maybe she was just a drunk woman and this was nothing more than an uncomfortable standoff with a sad and intoxicated woman. I mean, if she was really that drunk, the stairs probably weren't a good idea. We were on the 7th floor. Nevertheless, I just didn't feel like it was worth the risk to engage with this woman. I just wanted to enter my suite and dive into bed. It was late, and my feet still hurt. As we took a few steps forward, the woman stopped. Almost with laser precision, she stood up completely straight, looked right at our door, and then began to pound on our door, screaming bloody murder. I could feel myself becoming swallowed with fear. I reached for my cell phone and began to dial 911. The woman kept pounding on our door and screaming. To be honest, I'm surprised none of our neighbors came out to see what was happening. Part of me thinks they were too afraid themselves and were probably peering out of their peepholes. Afraid of what our neighbors would think, my husband said, "Hey, what are you doing? Stop that." And just like that, the strange woman stopped, fell to the ground, and began crawling quickly towards us. She looked up for a brief second. All I could see were her dark eyes. Her mouth seemed to be stained black and she was growling again. But this time, it was as if there was something in her throat that she was choking on. Frozen with fear, my husband and I just watched until she flashed us a menacing hiss, the kind you would hear in a movie, but never imagine in real life. Terrified, I whipped off my shoes and my husband and I ran towards the staircase on the other side of the building. We didn't want to risk waiting for the elevator and have her catching up. We went down 2 flights of stairs and stopped to listen if she was making her way down the stairs. But it was almost impossible to hear as my heart was pounding so hard. I thought to myself, what the hell was going on? We waited there for 10 minutes or so, until eventually we had the courage to head up the stairs and back to our suite. The woman was gone, and so we entered our suite. I was just relieved to finally be safe in my home. My husband sent a text to our landlord, and he replied that we would hear from him in the morning. I was so unbelievably exhausted, but found it incredibly difficult to sleep. The sound of that woman's growling and cackling rang in my ears. I hardly slept. The next day, when my husband went to speak to the landlord, he asked him to check the security cameras, although nothing turned up. The landlord said the cameras glitched due to the frigid temperatures last night. To this day, I still don't know what to think. That woman most certainly had problems. The question is, was she dangerous? We moved about a year later, but every New Year's Eve, I still think about that night. It was New Year's Eve of 2020, and all of us were ready for this horrible year to be over. My friend Logan was throwing a house party. I arrived early to help set things up. I secured a spot to sleep in his parents' room, meaning I could drive to the party and drink without having to worry about driving home. His parents obviously weren't home for the night. Most of our close friends in our friend group came, plus a bunch of Logan's friends who I didn't know. The party was fun. At midnight, everyone screamed Happy New Year and cheers their drinks. After that, people slowly started circulating out and the party started to quiet down, as people went to either other parties, bars, or home. The later the night got, the more it became just the closer friends staying behind until it just turned into a chill drinking session in the living room. This went on late into the night. It was likely 3 a.m. when the last of everyone who wasn't sleeping at Logan's house was gone. As it quieted down, we started hearing this occasional sound. At first we didn't know what it was, but it soon started to sound like a creaking sound. It was dismissed as a sound from the fridge or something at first, which I know sounds stupid, but house appliances often make weird noises. It was just Logan, me, and Cody. Cody was falling asleep on the couch already. It was reaching that time where we were just going to go to sleep. However, eventually we got so bothered by the noise that we had to search. We went to the kitchen, and it wasn't coming from in there. We realized when we were close to the basement door that it was coming from downstairs. Logan opened the door, and we heard this creaking sound. "Go check what it is," I said. He kept saying no way. Then he called down into the basement, "Yo, who's down there?" The creaking stopped, and we never heard it again. After a solid minute of waiting at the top of the stairs, we agreed to go down together. We both grabbed knives, drunkenly thinking that was a good idea, when in reality we were so drunk we'd probably only hurt ourselves with them. We got to the bottom of the stairs and looked through the entire basement. It's not huge. It just has a couch, TV, a bar, a table in the corner, and various old pieces of junk. It was pretty messy at the time. The first thing we did was search any possible crevice for someone who could be hiding. Then we tried to figure out what could have been making that sound. I noticed a rocking chair, and so I went up to it, sat in it, and then started rocking in it. And it made the exact same creaking sound we had been hearing. Logan and I looked at each other. I stood up, and so did every hair on my body. I don't think we ever ran faster than we did when we ran up those stairs and slammed the door shut. We tried to come up with any logical explanation, but there was none. He kept the basement door locked for days until his parents came back. There was no living soul down there, but something was moving that rocking chair. That rocking chair used to belong to his grandma, who passed away forever ago, and it's just something his mom held onto for sentimental reasons. I can't say I've ever experienced anything resembling the paranormal before this, nor since then. It still sends chills down my spine. This happened way back in 2005. I was 18. I was living in Uvalde, Texas, a very low-income neighborhood, the kind you'll find sprawled out all over the place in rural Texas when you're not right outside of a city. The closest city to me was San Antonio. I was going to some local community college, because that's all my parents could afford for me. One of my best friends from high school, Andrew, moved to San Antonio to go to San Antonio College. He was living in some small apartment a little outside of the city with a roommate. His girlfriend would also often stay with him. Since the city's only really an hour and a half away, I would visit him all the time. He invited me this one weekend to come crash for the night, so I took my trusty old 1995 Toyota pickup truck. Nah, just kidding, the thing was a piece of crap. The gas gauge didn't even work on it. I'd have to always just keep track of when the last time I filled the tank up was, then reset the trip mileage. I took Route 90, which was a straight shot from Uvalde to San Antonio. I was on the road at like 3 p.m. on a Friday, and there was no traffic at all. I got to Andrew at a reasonable time. His girlfriend wouldn't be getting there until tomorrow, so tonight we were going to go out. We stopped at a liquor store and we drank in his apartment for a while with his roommate. Then the three of us went to this dive bar that would kind of look the other way with fake IDs. That was basically our night. We got back to their apartment around 2 a.m. after getting food. I slept on the couch. The next day would have almost been the same thing, but Andrew and his girlfriend were having issues all day, and as the two of them got drunker as the night progressed, she started yelling at him in front of me, and it got really awkward and uncomfortable. I didn't really have much to drink that day because I was already iffy about staying the night with her there. I eventually decided I would just head back home. I said goodbye to everyone and started my journey home. It was very late at night. I want to guess midnight, maybe a little earlier. Route 90 was deserted at this time, so I would fly for my pickup standards. But suddenly the engine started sputtering. I felt my heart completely drop as I realized I forgot to fill up the tank. I slowed down, but it was too late. The engine cut. I pulled to the side of the road and tried starting it a few times, but it did no good. I took out my cell phone, which was equally as shitty as my truck, and I tried to get a signal. No shot. I couldn't even call for help. I had to just put my hazards on and hope a good Samaritan would pass. You wouldn't believe how long I sat on the side of the road before seeing headlights. I waved my arms as the car approached, but it zoomed past me, ignoring me. This happened again after another 10 minutes or so. I was starting to feel hopeless, like maybe I should just sleep in my car and wait till sunrise to get help. So that's what I was gonna do. I got inside my car, took the key out of the ignition to cut the battery, and just angled my seat back to go to sleep. I would hear the occasional car zooming past like once every 10 minutes, but it didn't feel worth waving people down in the dark. It seemed sketchy for myself and to the people in the cars, but when I was starting to actually drift away to sleep, a car door closing from behind me woke me up. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw a car pulled up behind me with its headlights off. I turned around now to get a better look. There was some big pickup truck, but I couldn't see anyone inside of it, nor did I see anyone outside of it. Maybe someone pulled over to help. I got out of the car and said "excuse me" to no response. I walked closer to the truck just to confirm no one was inside. Then I walked back to my car. This was weird. I looked towards the trees on the side of the road. Maybe someone was pissing in the woods. I went back inside of my car and locked the door. This was just too weird. Suddenly there was a tap at my window. I jumped. I looked to see a man looking down at me into the car, smiling. I didn't do anything yet. He said, "Hey buddy, need a hand?" I lowered the window a crack and said, "Hey, I ran out of gas." The man said, "That's quite the predicament. Step out and give me a hand with this real quick." When he said this, I thought he meant help him with a gas jug to fill up my tank or something, honestly. And so I stepped out of the truck and shut the door, expecting him to lead me to his truck. But he stood there, looked down at me because he was much taller, still smiling, and said, "I need you to empty your pockets, please." It took me a second to process what he meant. I was literally a broke college student driving a piece of shit pickup truck. I wasn't about to get robbed of the only cash I had and my phone. I ran for it in the direction of the trees. I'm small but fast. I turned around and saw he was chasing after me. Once I made it into the trees, I zigzagged all over the place until I seemed to lose him. Then I crouched behind a big tree to catch my breath. When I heard him approaching closer, I quieted my breath. I heard him say out loud, "I'll kill you, you piece of shit." I don't know if he was just saying it out loud out of anger, or if he wanted me to hear it, but I was too scared to move. Even after I heard his footsteps move away, I didn't move. In fact, I stayed in this position the rest of the night, eventually laying behind this big tree up until dawn. I went back over to the highway to my truck, and the truck behind me was gone, but my truck's doors were both open. I found that my glove box had been gone through and completely emptied of anything somewhat valuable. My flannel hoodie was also taken, which had something in the pocket, I'm sure. I finally managed to wave down a good Samaritan, and he gave me a ride to the closest gas station. I bought a fuel can, filled it with gas, and the man brought me back to my car, where I filled my tank just enough to drive the truck to a gas station to fill up completely. Then I went straight home. This was a real-life learning experience for me that there are bad people out there who will try to take advantage of you when you're in a vulnerable spot, but there are also good people, like the man who helped me. When I was 18, I was very immature and naive. I was kind of a jerk when I was on the road, honking whenever I got impatient, borderline cutting people off. Looking back now, it was very stupid, and if I ever have kids, I'll be that much more strict with them as far as their driving. That being said, I did drive a lot for someone my age. I went away to school 5 hours away from home. No matter what day of the week, traffic always gets atrocious the closer I get to home. So during breaks, I'll drive home at night to avoid this. It goes from a 4 to 5 hour drive down to a 3-hour drive. It was the beginning of winter break, as the fall semester just ended. All my friends left for home on the same day. I just waited till later on in the night to head out, because there's nothing I hate more than traffic. I used to drive a Mazda 3 that I would beat the ever-living crap out of, and admittedly, I used to be known for driving my car to a near-empty tank consistently. People would comment on it whenever they'd be in the car with me, and I'd always assure them that the car would still have at least 30 miles to go even after the needle would hit E. I found out the night I was driving home from school that I was wrong. I was only like an hour into my drive on the interstate. The needle was on E, and I was pushing my luck, waiting for a gas station sign instead of looking up the nearest one on the map. The car started making these weird sounds suddenly and jolting, and that's when I realized I may have actually run the tank empty this time. I got off the first exit ramp and hoped it would lead right to a gas station. This exit was dark though, with no street lights, and there was just woods on either side. I was scared to slow down and lose my speed because I didn't know if I'd have enough gas to find a gas station. I blew through the stop sign at the end of the ramp and made a sharp, fast turn on the intersecting road, which was another dark road surrounded by woods. I was screwed. The car eventually came to a stop and the engine died. Things only got worse when I took out my phone and saw I had no bars. I have T-Mobile, which is the worst possible reception anywhere far from a major city. I tried calling 911 because I was stupid and thought that 911 works even without reception. Of course, it didn't. I was terrified because I didn't know what to do. I turned on my hazard lights and just waited for someone to pass by. It was a long time before I saw headlights approaching. When I did, I flashed my headlights at them, and they passed me, made a U-turn, then pulled up on the grass behind me. I didn't know who was getting out of that car though, and I was an 18-year-old defenseless girl. I just cracked the window down a little bit as this man approached my car. I told him I need help, I ran out of gas. He offered to give me a ride to the nearest gas station. He was this balding guy with glasses on. He kind of looked trustworthy. I had no other apparent options but to accept his offer. I got out of the car and followed him to his car, making sure to lock my doors first. His car was a black Honda, year probably of 2010. It smelled funky in his car. I couldn't pin what the smell could be though. He banged another U-turn and started driving in the direction he was driving before. He made conversation with me, asking where I was from and basic questions. I was honest with him that I was driving home from school. He said he lived in the area, and that they don't get too many out-of-towners getting off the interstate for this quiet little town. The route we were taking lacked any buildings anywhere. It was just woods everywhere. I asked if he knew of any gas stations, and he said yeah, just a ways up the road. I started hearing bumping and thumping coming from the back of the vehicle. It sounded like the trunk. At first I thought it was maybe just bumps in the road or a loose object in the trunk. He seemed to keep talking and talking, like he wouldn't stop. Finally, we got to a sort of town-looking area. There were some lights and buildings at last. A diner and a few small houses. There was a red light at the first intersection since I got in his car. We came to a stop, and for the first time there was silence. And then, I heard the unmistakable sound of someone screaming in the trunk, followed by thumps and bangs. I looked at the man, who looked at me. In a split second, I unbuckled my seatbelt, opened the door, and ran, while at the same time he tried grabbing me and pulling me back into the car. I heard him get out as well, but instead of chasing me, he ran to close his passenger side door, and then I heard him floor it down the street. I ran into the diner and asked for help, making a scene. I used their phone to call 911. I waited there, and it became this whole huge thing, with multiple police showing up to the diner to take a report. Given the gravity of the report that I was making, that I heard someone in the trunk of the car, they had to get every last detail from me about the man's car, his appearance, and where he picked me up. I was also given a ride back to my car so that they could also include the pickup location in the report. They also helped me get a hold of AAA, which eventually would come to my location to fill my car with gas. This was overall the scariest experience of my life. I was shaken to the core the whole rest of the ride home. I hope they found that man. I hope whoever was in that trunk is still alive today. For all I know, that man could have been bringing me to his house or somewhere else, and I was just lucky I had a chance to get out at that red light. I live in Burke County, North Carolina in Morganton. I'm used to the quiet lifestyle that comes with living in a rural place. You get some weird characters here and there, but it's usually nothing too bad. I own a nice plot of land with my husband. My work schedule fluctuates. Sometimes I work days, sometimes I work nights. This happened on a night that I was on my way home after a night shift, so it had to be like 3 a.m. My phone was almost dead, I was hungry, I was tired, and I just wanted to get some food and head home. I stopped at a gas station to get $10 worth of gas and also a packaged sandwich, which I proceeded to eat inside the gas station cafe. Some sketchy guy was eyeing me for a little until he left the building without buying anything. After eating, I went outside to fill up the gas, and and then got back in the car. The smell of gasoline was extra pungent for some reason. These roads are very dark and twisty at night, so I was driving slow, especially since I was tired after a long day of work. Then something unexpected happened. The needle on the gas gauge suddenly dropped to E, and the low gas light came on and beeped. I had no idea what was going on. I'm not a car person, and I'd never run out of gas before this. Plus, the needle just suddenly dropped. I thought at first that the computer was glitching, so I pulled over and restarted the car, but the needle was still on E. I tried to continue driving, but the engine died. I started having a panic attack. I called my husband first thing, and thank God he picked up. I asked him how did my car run out of gas after I just filled up, and as I got out of the car, I smelled gasoline. I told him this, and he said it sounds like I have a leak. He told me he'd head right over, and he'd call our roadside assistance company. But then I heard a car coming with no headlights, and suddenly it stopped, not far behind my car. I suddenly thought to bring up that sketchy guy who was watching me at the gas station, and asked my husband if there was a chance he did something to my car. My husband's tone suddenly changed to sounding more concerned and worried. He said, yes, there's a chance that he may have cut my fuel line. I didn't know what that meant. All I knew was I needed to run. I took my keys out of the ignition and shut the door and locked it so that the headlights would turn off. My phone was on like 2%, so I told him to text me when he's close. I ran off the road and towards the first house I could find. I ran down the long driveway and up the property to the front door. All the lights in the house were off. I still rang the bell multiple times anyway. Eventually, a light turned on, and then the door opened. A man in his 60s opened the door. He looked like he was just woken up. I asked him to let me in to hide and charge my phone. After a bit of explaining, he opened the door fully and let me in. I asked him for an iPhone charger, and he said he'd go look for one, then asked me to take a seat in the living room. I sat down, still in my nurse scrubs, feeling a mix of emotions. The man called out from the kitchen asking me if I wanted some water. I said yes, please. Little did he know, I saw his reflection in a mirror in the living room that gave visibility into the kitchen. I saw him fill a cup with water. Then I know for a fact I saw him drop something into the water. He walked out of view of the mirror, but the faucet was still running. It ran for a solid 30 more seconds before he turned it off. He came back into the living room with a glass of water and handed it to me. I thanked him, and he sat down and just looked at me, then asked me to explain the situation again. I replied to him I just really needed chargers so that I could contact my husband. He said, "Oh right," and went upstairs. I checked my phone, and it was on 1%. I used that remaining battery to send my current location to my husband just in case. I then smelled the glass of water, and although it didn't smell like anything, I knew he put something in it. Now I had to make the decision of whether I should leave or not. On one hand, I needed to charge my phone badly. On the other, I was 99% sure he did something to this water. I heard him walking back down the stairs, and he said he doesn't have any iPhone chargers since he has an Android. After he said this, I got up and walked straight for the door. I'm not an idiot. Once outside, I ran back down the driveway to the road. I felt like throwing up. I couldn't believe 2 separate potential incidents from 2 different men happened in one night. I crept along the side of the road behind the trees. I took out my phone and sent my updated location, and right around now was when my battery died. I waited for until I saw familiar headlights of my husband's truck. I went out waving my arms, and thank God it was him. I got inside the truck and let all my emotions out, crying to him about what I just went through. He brought us to my car, and there was no longer a car behind mine. My back window was shattered though, and it appeared someone had gotten into the back seat, but nothing of high value was left in my car to steal anyway. My car battery was also now dead. When I told my husband about the man who tried to potentially roofie me, he was so furious he wanted to go break down his door, but I told him no, let's just wait for the tow truck to come. We waited quite a while before it came, and my car was towed to my dealership, where they would take the car in the next day. My husband was right. My car was vandalized and the fuel line was cut completely. Thank God I was off the next few days because I needed some time to mentally recover from this night. The idea that twice in one night I was almost a victim of some sketchy men, I just couldn't get over.